Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Banaz Mahmoud. Banaz Mahmoud was born in Iraq in 1985. She grew up in a traditional family with strong religious beliefs. When she was 10, her family moved to the UK, but their cultural values remained unchanged. At 17, Banaz was forced into a marriage with a man 10 years her senior, who spoke no English and was illiterate. The marriage was marked by physical and emotional abuse, which Banaz endured for 2 years before finally finding the courage to leave. Despite her family's disapproval, Banaz started a new life and met a man named Rahmat Suleimani, with whom she fell deeply in love. However, their relationship was kept secret due to the cultural taboos surrounding romance outside of marriage. Tragically, Banaz's family was not willing to let her move on from her past. On January 26, 2006, Rahmat reported Banaz missing to the police, but they didn't take the report seriously, convinced that she was just staying with friends. However, Rahmat persisted, and eventually the police were forced to investigate. Banaz's family had a sinister motive for their behavior, which would ultimately lead to devastating consequences. However, Banaz had found love and happiness with her boyfriend, Rahmat. They had dreams of getting married, having children, and building a happy family life. These fantasies were Banaz's joy and kept her going despite her family's hatred and aggression towards her. Her family had never accepted her husband, and in early October 2005, Banaz noticed that she was being followed by people sent by her father. On October 10, 2005, Banaz went to the police and told them about her life with her husband, the injuries she had suffered, and the surveillance she was under. She shared her fears for her safety and even her life, but the police did not take her statement seriously. For about 2 months, Banaz and Rahmat met secretly, but in early December 2005, they were spotted by people from her clan. This led to a council of male relatives gathering at her family home, where it was decided that Banaz should be killed to restore the family's honor. Banaz overheard this conversation and reported it to the police, but they again did not take her words seriously. 2 weeks later, Banaz's father tricked her into going to a relative's house, where she was attacked. She managed to escape and went to the police, who took her to the hospital. After being discharged, Banaz went to live with Rahmat. However, by mid-January 2006, Banaz's family began urging her to return home to mend their relationship and discuss her marriage to Rahmat. Despite her fears, Banaz agreed to go back to her father's house, believing that her mother would protect her. Before Banaz Mahmoud returned to her family's home, she visited the police station to report her concerns and name individuals who might harm her. However, she disappeared on January 22, 2006, and her friend Rahmat was unable to contact her. Rahmat then filed a missing persons report with the police. The police eventually became involved in the case, and Chief Inspector Caroline Good was appointed to lead the investigation. She organized a large-scale search of properties associated with the Mahmoud family, suspecting that Banaz might be being held captive. The police questioned Banaz's father, uncle, and ex-husband, as well as 3 of her cousins, Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Hamid, who were also suspects. Despite the efforts of the police, Banaz's family was uncooperative and refused to help with the investigation. The police found no pictures of Banaz at her family's home, and her family members gave contradictory and false statements about her whereabouts. The police arrested 30 people, including Banaz's family members and cousins, but they all tried to slow down the investigation by giving false information. The police obtained permission to install listening devices in the cells of the arrested men, including Banaz's father, uncle, and Muhammad Hamid. The wiretap recordings revealed that the 3 men had no remorse for their actions and were actually proud of what they had done to Banaz. The recordings revealed that on the morning of January 23rd, the Mahmoud family deliberately left their home, allowing Ali Hussein and Hamid to enter and attack Banaz. The attack lasted for 2 hours, during which Banaz was subjected to beatings and violence. Finally, Hamid strangled her to death with a cord. The wiretap recordings also revealed that Banaz's cousin, Muhammad Hamid, had been involved in the attack and had threatened Rahmat, which became a turning point in the investigation. The police were horrified as they listened to recordings that detailed the brutal murder of Banaz and the perpetrators' proud descriptions of their actions. The investigation revealed that Banaz's body had been stuffed into a suitcase and taken out of London to a derelict house with a garden in Birmingham. Caroline Good, a detective, matched the information she received with the movement data of the arrested phones and determined the search area. Despite the vastness of the area, the work could take a long time, but the criminals themselves helped the investigation by being talkative and reveling in their actions. During the conversation, one of them mentioned putting a freezer back in its place, which gave Caroline a key lead to follow. A police helicopter was dispatched to search the area, and while circling, it spotted a house with a pile of trash in the backyard, including a white, oblong object that looked like a freezer. When the police inspected the area, they started digging in shifts. As they dug, they eventually reached a depth of about shoulder height. At this point, they were about to give up. But then Caroline Good recalled the words of Muhammad Hamama, who had bragged about burying Banaz so deeply that she would only be discovered if someone tipped them off. Caroline convinced the team to extend the search for one more day, and late in the evening of April 28, 2006, the suitcase was found. Banaz's remains were in extremely poor condition, and only dental records and DNA samples could be used to identify her. Her body was folded into a fetal position and hidden in a suitcase, buried under a freezer in the garden of a house in Birmingham. On May 1, 2006, the suspects were charged, but they showed no remorse and were convinced they had done the right thing. After the discovery of Banaz's remains, the police received a flood of people providing alibis for the suspects, claiming they were in public on the day of the alleged murder. In total, 50 people were involved in Banaz's death, and Caroline Good felt anger, disgust, and contempt for the men who participated in the murder. The case eventually went to trial in March 2007, and the prosecutor described the crime as a cold-blooded and heartless execution ordered by Banaz's father and uncle. In June 2007, a jury found all three guilty and sentenced them to life imprisonment with minimum terms ranging from 17 to 23 years. The judge condemned the crime as barbaric and heartless, saying that the father had put his status in society above the life of his own flesh and blood. Muhammad Ali was arrested in Iraq in April 2006 for a crime against a young woman named Banaz Mahmoud. The London police worked to extradite him to the UK. In June 2009, Ali was extradited and eventually sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. The last of the 5 perpetrators, Omar Hussein, was hiding in the Iraqi countryside. In December 2009, he got into an argument with his brother and was shot in the leg. He was taken to the hospital, where the police arrested him. Initially, Hussein denied being in London in 2005 and therefore couldn't be involved in Banaz's death. However, UK social security records proved that he was receiving refugee benefits at the time, contradicting his claim. In March 2010, Hussein was extradited and later sentenced to life imprisonment. Donna Ammon, who was in the house at the time of Banaz's murder, was sentenced to 8 years in prison for helping to dispose of the victim's body and obstructing justice. A recorded interview at the police station revealed her family's guilt. Banaz had tried to leave her abusive husband several times, but returned to try again at the insistence of her family. The police's indifference to her plight led to her death, which sparked significant changes in how honor killings are handled. An inquiry into police misconduct was launched, and 9 police officers were prosecuted for their inadequate response. 7 received reprimands, and 2 were dismissed. Caroline Good, a determined detective, not only found Banaz's body, but also secured the conviction of her father and uncle and brought back the escaped criminals from Iraq. Unfortunately, this wouldn't bring Banaz back to life or change the fact that her own relatives, who should have protected her, were responsible for her death. Banaz was buried in the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery in Morden. A memorial service was held on June 26, 2007, at the MN Auditorium, followed by a granite memorial headstone at her grave. Her family did not attend either service. The memorial was paid for by law enforcement officials working on the Banaz case and the women's rights organization. Ramat Suleimani, Banaz's boyfriend, remained in the UK under the Witness Protection Program, but never recovered from her death. In May 2016, 10 years after the crime, he hanged himself, marking his third attempt to end his life. The extent of the problem with police handling of honor crimes is unknown due to the lack of recording requirements. However, estimates suggest that in 2000, there were 5,000 honor killings worldwide. And in 2010, over 2,800 cases of honor-based violence were reported in Iran and Kurdistan. These crimes typically involve women who are perceived to have brought shame to their families or communities. Most cases occur in South Asia or the Middle East, predominantly in Muslim communities. However, cases like that of 19-year-old Banaz Mahmoud, a Kurdish woman living in Britain, highlight the tensions faced by immigrant communities as they struggle to adapt to changing lifestyles. Some groups estimate that thousands of honor crimes go unreported in minority communities in Britain, where women are often taken abroad and forced into marriage or harmed when their modern outlook on life conflicts with their traditional male communities. Banaz Mahmoud, who was murdered in 2006, is a tragic example of this. Her older sister, Beal, urges other women in similar situations not to be afraid to seek help before it's too late. Even today, Beal lives in fear for her life, hiding her identity behind a long black veil that covers her entire body and face, except for her eyes. The story of Banaz Mahmoud is a stark reminder that women who try to escape or live a secret life are constantly in fear of being found and punished. The Metropolitan Police team that investigated Banaz's murder and brought those responsible to justice was awarded for their work in detective investigation. A crucial piece of evidence was a videotape that captured Banaz's nervous testimony, in which she described the violence and oppression she faced at the hands of her abusive husband and the intimidation she suffered from men on the street. She warned of her impending death due to the shame she had brought upon her family. Unfortunately, her warnings were ignored, and she was ultimately killed. The case of Kaylee Mandadi. Kaylee Anita Mandadi was born on August 26, 1998, in Webster to Tak Mandadi and Allison Steele. The family was well off, with Allison being a scientist and Tak working as an international executive director at MGM Resorts. After her parents divorced, Allison remarried NASA engineer Lawrence Buton, who lived in Houston. Despite her parents' separation, Kaylee maintained a strong relationship with her father, regularly communicating with him. Her stepfather also adored Kaylee and became like a second dad to her. Kaylee was not only a grateful and loving daughter and granddaughter, but also an excellent student, team member, sister, and friend, known for her infectious laughter and kind heart that could light up any room. Kaylee excelled academically and was actively involved in various extracurricular activities in school, including horseback riding, piano playing, and theater performances. She was also a dedicated Girl Scout and enjoyed spending time with her friends and family, whether it was hiking with her parents or running around the neighborhood. After graduating with honors from Clear Creek High School in League City, Texas, in 2016, Kaylee went on to study communications at Trinity University in San Antonio. With her dark hair and radiant beauty, she quickly became popular among her peers, leading the football team's cheerleading squad and making many friends. Kaylee was always eager to try new and exciting things, from exploring uncharted territories to participating in extreme sports. Her love for animals led her to volunteer with an animal therapy group where she found joy in helping others. During a football game, Kaylee met Mark Houghton, a 22-year-old athlete and professional baseball player. At first, she didn't notice him as she was already smitten with someone else. However, Mark was immediately captivated by her charisma and striking features, particularly her large black eyes. Mark and Kaylee's first 2 meetings didn't go smoothly, but Mark didn't give up. By September 2017, they had officially started dating. From the start, their friends and acquaintances thought they were a mismatched pair because they were both emotional and had short tempers. Their relationship was lacking in compromise and was characterized by heated arguments and confrontations from the beginning. The young couple's passion often turned to jealousy, leading to frequent quarrels. Friends who witnessed their relationship reported that Kaylee often had bruises on her arms and legs. A close friend shared a particularly disturbing incident in which Kaylee was too afraid to retrieve her phone from Mark and asked the friend to do it for her. Things eventually escalated to a frightening point where Mark became aggressive, threatened violence, and even pulled out a gun. Kaylee was aware that her boyfriend Mark had a jealous temper, and their loud arguments were frequent. Although she never wanted their fights to be public knowledge, she acknowledged that she wasn't blameless in their disputes. However, on September 24, 2017, her roommates intervened, calling the police around 1 a.m. after hearing loud noises and Mark yelling threats from Kaylee's room. When the police arrived, they found Mark alone in the room. Kaylee refused to press charges, downplaying the incident as just a lover's quarrel. Nevertheless, her friends suspected that Mark's anger issues were fueled by substance abuse and reported his violent threats, including an incident where he threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony. Despite their tumultuous relationship, Mark and Kaylee had moments of deep love and affection. However, their bliss was short-lived, as their argument at the Malaluna Music Festival in San Antonio on October 29th, triggered by the unexpected appearance of Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, demonstrated. The fight was so intense that they left the festival early. Mark's black Mercedes arrived at a hospital 6 hours after their friends last saw them. He rushed out of the car, frantically waving and calling for help. In the front seat, medical staff found an unconscious, semi-nude girl. The car was in disarray, with Kaylee's clothes scattered around. She was slumped forward, resembling a lifeless doll. The medical staff rushed Kaylee to the emergency room on a stretcher. Mark told them they had taken illegal substances before attending the festival, which helped doctors treat her for a possible overdose. She was later transferred to a medical facility in Kyle, Texas, where a nurse specializing in intimate assault cases examined her and found additional bruises on her arms, legs, and ear. The autopsy revealed that Kaylee died from blunt force trauma to her face and head, indicating she was a victim of a deadly attack. The police then launched an investigation to find her killer. Mark became the main suspect since he was the last person seen with Kaylee that night. Although there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime, Mark's behavior during police interviews raised suspicions. He changed his story multiple times, contradicting his initial account. Surveillance footage also showed him and Kaylee at locations he had previously denied being at. Additionally, interviews with Kaylee's friends and family revealed a history of aggressive behavior towards her, with one of her sisters even admitting to being terrified of him. Kaylee's mother, Allison Steele, has filed a lawsuit against Trinity University, accusing the institution of failing to protect her daughter from Mark's attacks. The lawsuit, filed in Becker County District Court, also names Mark Houghton as a defendant. It claims that Mark's assault led to Kaylee's death, motivated by jealousy. The lawsuit alleges that Trinity University's staff, administration, and campus police were aware of Mark's erratic behavior during his relationship with Kaylee. Despite this, the university took no action to protect Kaylee in the weeks leading up to her death, even though Mark had threatened to break her face or cause her serious harm. A Trinity University spokesperson declined to comment on the lawsuit's allegations, citing the ongoing legal process. Mark was banned from campus for a year due to an incident in his dorm room, but he repeatedly violated the ban. During investigations, it was discovered that Mark had a history of violent behavior towards his girlfriend, Kay, including threatening to harm her sisters and others. Her sisters reported that Mark had threatened to throw one sister off a balcony and shoot her ex-boyfriend's brothers. Mark had an arrest warrant issued against him, and he surrendered in February 2018. He faced multiple charges, including criminal acts, intimate violence, and abduction, but pleaded not guilty. The trial regarding Kaylee Mandadi's death began in December 2019. Prosecutors argued that Mark's volatile temper led him to fatally assault Kaylee in a fit of rage, causing her severe injuries. They claimed that Mark then waited 6 hours before taking her to the hospital. Mark's defense team suggested that Kaylee's death might have been caused by factors other than Mark's actions, such as the banned substances found in her system, which could have led to a spike in blood pressure or head trauma during intimate activity. Kaylee's mother described her daughter's injuries as extremely severe, comparable to those sustained from a fall from an airplane. The injuries covered her entire body, from her head to her toes, including bruises, red marks, and scratches. The only areas that were not injured were her back and the back of her legs. Dr. Susanna Dana, the forensic pathologist who performed Kaylee's autopsy, presented graphic evidence, including photographs of the victim's injuries. These images revealed a subdural hematoma, a type of bleeding in the brain typically associated with traumatic brain injury, on the right side of Kaylee's brain. Dr. Dana testified that Kaylee suffered severe cranial and facial injuries, including a dent in her skull and extensive bruising and trauma to her face. She also found bruises on Kaylee's eyelids, jaws, mouth, gums, lips, and cheeks, as well as hemorrhages in both eyes. Dr. William Anderson disagreed with Dr. Dana's conclusion, stating that the autopsy results were inconsistent with the idea that Kaylee was attacked. Instead, he believed that Kaylee's injuries were more likely caused by a fall and subsequent medical treatment. Defense attorney John Hunter argued that the prosecution lacked concrete evidence to explain what happened to Kaylee on the night in question, and that it was impossible to prove Mark's involvement. He highlighted Kaylee's history of drug use, including her prior treatment for substance dependence at a hospital. Jason Wallach, a professor, testified that Kaylee's blood contained a high level of MDMA, also known as ecstasy or Molly, on the evening of October 29, 2017. The concentration of MDMA in her blood suggested that she could have suffered a minor head injury, which could then be exacerbated by the drug into a life-threatening condition. John Hunter suggested that a drug can affect individuals differently, leading to varying physical reactions, such as increased body temperature or electrolyte imbalance, which can cause loss of consciousness. During the trial, Mark Houghton testified that he and Kaylee Mandadi had an argument and engaged in intimate relations in the car before she passed out. He claimed that their intimacy was consensual and involved rough sex, which included strangling her at her request. However, the origin of the bruises on Kaylee's body remained unclear. Kaylee's mother, Allison, was convinced that Mark Houghton was responsible for her daughter's death. Despite being charged with her murder, Mark Houghton maintained his innocence during the 2019 trial. The defense argued that Kaylee's injuries were caused by hospital staff during resuscitation efforts, which led to a mistrial due to the jury's inability to reach a verdict. The case was presided over by Judge Raymond Angeline in the 144th District Court. Following the mistrial, Bexar County District Attorney Joe Gonzalez expressed disappointment and announced that he would review the case. Kaylee's parents decided to conduct their own investigation, focusing on a small bruise near Kaylee's ear. They believed that Mark Houghton might have hit her head against the car window, causing the bruise. Kaylee's parents collected evidence, including autopsy reports and photos, and obtained 3 affidavits under oath. This led to Mark Houghton's arrest on charges of aggravated intimate assault and criminal mischief. The timeline of events presented in the investigation highlighted Mark Houghton's alleged lies and the evidence that led to his arrest. During the trial, prosecutors portrayed Mark Houghton as a manipulative and controlling boyfriend who constantly called Kaylee and took her phone away. 2 weeks before her death, Mark Houghton pushed Kaylee against a brick wall and trashed her dorm room. Kaylee then asked for space, and Mark Houghton began sending her dozens of messages, threatening to end his life. The couple attended a festival where they argued over Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. Mark Houghton then took Kaylee to a deserted parking lot, where they stayed for over an hour. Prosecutors suggested that it was there that Mark Houghton attacked and killed Kaylee. Kaylee's family thanked the Texas Rangers for their work in bringing criminal charges against Mark Houghton. The prosecution considered presenting a video recorded by Kaylee's parents, but ultimately withdrew it due to potential complications. Mark Houghton was convicted of aggravated assault, causing harm that led to the death of Kaylee Mandadi. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison with a $110,000 fine and restitution to Kaylee's family. He was also barred from contacting over 20 individuals involved in the case. Now over 30 years old, Mark is serving his sentence in Wilsey County Jail, eligible for parole in 2033. Although the conviction brought some closure to Kaylee's family, they felt the sentence was not enough for their loss. In the second trial, Mark faced additional charges, including aggravated assault and criminally negligent homicide. The prosecution presented a more comprehensive case against Mark, but the family was still dissatisfied with the outcome and sought a retrial. Kaylee's tragic story highlights the devastating impact of violence on young people and her family's quest for justice. Despite the conviction, Kaylee's family felt that the verdict did not serve justice for their daughter. In 2019, Kaylee's mother, Allison Steele, successfully lobbied the Texas legislature to expand the missing persons alert system in Texas. She also founded the nonprofit organization Kaylee's Calling, aiming to consolidate missing persons alert systems. Additionally, she established a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing public information about the Clear Alert, an emergency broadcasting alert in Texas for individuals aged 18 to 64. In 2021, Allison filed a civil lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging negligence in protecting her daughter. She claimed that none of Kaylee's guardians were informed that Mark Houghton had trashed her dorm room, giving him continuous access to her and making her vulnerable to manipulation. Despite being acquitted of the charge of ending a life, Mark was found guilty of aggravated assault, causing bodily harm. The family expressed satisfaction with the verdict, feeling relief that the legal proceedings had concluded, allowing them to begin the healing process. Losing a child is an agonizing ordeal, and sadly, it was a heart-wrenching journey that Kaylee's parents had to endure. Allison said they are still completely devastated by the loss of Kaylee, and asked those of faith to pray for her family, friends, and for justice in this matter. The case of Sarah Stern. Sarah Elizabeth Stern was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune City, New Jersey, to Michael and Susan Stern. As their only child, Sarah received all their love and attention due to her mother's health issues, which made it impossible for her to have more children. Sarah grew up to be an outgoing, cheerful, and energetic kid. She was actively involved in school theater, photography, drawing, and sports, competing in swimming and softball. Her dream was to become an artist or designer, and she planned to attend a local college for arts. Tragedy struck in 2013 when Sarah's mother, Susan, passed away after a long battle with cancer. This devastating loss sent Sarah into depression, but she tried to support her grieving father, Michael, with whom she lived. They found comfort in their dog, Buddy, whom Sarah adored. Sarah's life was finally taking a turn for the better. After graduating from college, she planned to apply to a prestigious university in New York. Before that, she had always dreamed of traveling the world, with Canada being her top destination. She even considered living there for a while. Meanwhile, Michael Stern frequently traveled out of state for work, sometimes for weeks at a time. But he never worried about leaving his daughter Sarah alone at home because she was a responsible and independent young adult. And their town was known for being quiet and safe. However, during one of Michael's business trips in December 2016, trouble arose. On the night of December 3rd, around 2:30 a.m., a taxi driver called the police station to report an abandoned car on the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35. The area was deserted and rarely visited at night, making the empty vehicle immediately suspicious. The taxi driver, who was taking a shortcut home over the old bridge, had stopped to check if anyone needed help when he saw the car parked by the side of the road. Finding the car empty and no one around, he called the police, suspecting that the driver might have abandoned their car to jump into the water below, a tragic but not uncommon occurrence at that spot. The police found an abandoned silver sedan on a bridge with the keys still in the ignition, but no signs of blood or struggle. They suspected that the owner might have gone there to commit suicide by jumping into the river. After checking the car's ownership, they found it belonged to 85-year-old Lily Stern, who lived in the same town. When the officers visited Lily, they found her alive and well. She told them that she hadn't driven for years due to poor eyesight, and that her 19-year-old granddaughter Sarah used the car. Lily tried to call Sarah, but her phone was turned off. Lily then gave the officers her son's address, where Sarah lived, and mentioned that her father was away on a work trip. When the police went to the house, they found the back door open, which was concerning. After searching the house, they didn't find anything suspicious, except for a locked-in dog whining in one of the bedrooms. The house was in order, with no signs of struggle, blood, or evidence of an intruder. However, Sarah was nowhere to be found. Michael Stern rushed home on the first available flight after learning about the situation. When he arrived, the homeowner informed him that nothing was out of place or missing, including all of Sarah's personal belongings, such as her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone, which she always carried with her. The police shared their initial theory with Michael, suggesting that Sarah might have gone to the bridge intending to jump, and asked if he had noticed any signs of suicidal thoughts or self-harm attempts. Michael admitted that Sarah had struggled with depression after her mother's passing, but with support from family, friends, and her studies, she had recovered. She had ambitious plans for her future, including becoming a designer and traveling the world. Despite this, on the night of December 3rd, Sarah disappeared from her home, and her car was found abandoned on the bridge just hours later. These were the known facts, and the investigation now needed to focus on identifying who Sarah had been in contact with that day, what conversations she had, and who was the last person to see her. After Sarah Stern's disappearance, early witnesses came forward to reveal that she had spent most of December 2nd with her childhood friend, Liam McAtasney. As the last person to see her, Liam had valuable information that could help solve the mysterious case. The police quickly decided to interview him to gather details and piece together what had happened that day. When the police arrived at Liam's house, they met his mother, who told them that her son was sleeping after working a night shift. At the officer's request, she woke Liam up, who seemed puzzled by the situation. Upon learning about Sarah's disappearance, Liam was shocked and confirmed that they had indeed spent the previous day together. He agreed to go to the police station to give a statement. Liam and Sarah attended college together and decided to skip their last 2 lectures on Friday morning. After classes, they went back to her place, where they spent the day playing video games, chatting, and discussing their future plans. They left her house twice, once to get food from a nearby fast food restaurant, and again to visit a local supermarket around 7 p.m. Liam then left Sarah's house to start his night shift at a 24-hour store, and didn't see her again after that. When questioned about Sarah's mental state, Liam shared that she had been struggling with depression since her mother's death. She was torn between wanting to end her life or running away to start fresh. Liam also revealed that Sarah had difficulty communicating with her father and finding common ground with him. Although Liam didn't rule out the possibility that Sarah might have taken her own life, he mentioned that she had recently considered moving to Canada and had even exchanged some money for Canadian dollars. This was later confirmed when a small amount of Canadian currency was found in her bedside table drawer, although it wasn't enough to cover much. Preston Taylor, a close friend of Sarah's and her prom date, corroborated Liam's statement. He added that Sarah was struggling with depression and speculated that she might have either run away to Canada or jumped off the bridge. By the end of the conversation, Preston was overcome with emotion, expressing his deep affection for Sarah. The idea that Sarah had fled to Canada or elsewhere was quickly ruled out, as she didn't have her passport and couldn't have left the country. Investigators then focused on the possibility that Sarah might have jumped off the bridge, and a massive search effort was launched in the river. The strong current in the area complicated the search, as it could have carried a body far from the bridge. To aid in the search, divers were deployed, specialized equipment was used, and hundreds of volunteers, along with police, scoured the riverbanks for any signs of Sarah or her belongings. Liam and Preston were among the volunteers who actively helped search for Sarah. Unfortunately, the search efforts yielded nothing, and no sign of Sarah was found. As a result, the authorities decided to continue interviewing people who knew Sarah well, which led to the discovery of a strange inconsistency. Sarah's friends and classmates described her as being in great spirits, with none of them aware of any problems she had with her father. In fact, she often spoke about him in a warm and loving way. However, after she disappeared, her friends Liam and Preston seemingly took on the role of grieving relatives, garnering sympathy from many, but their behavior soon raised suspicions, as if they were acting for an audience. Despite only recently becoming close, the police decided to re-question Liam and Preston, noticing that their behavior was odd. During the re-questioning, Liam appeared deeply distressed when asked about his relationship with Sarah and Preston. Liam revealed that the three of them grew up together, attended the same school, and shared their deepest secrets and dreams. Preston had even taken Sarah to the prom, but their relationship was purely platonic. Liam considered Sarah like a sister, and they had even listed each other as siblings on social media. Sarah trusted him completely and had confided in him about the large sum of money her mother had left her, which was mostly stored in a safety deposit box. Sarah supposedly distrusted her father, who she thought wanted the money for himself, so she kept it in the bank with plans to withdraw it later to escape to Canada. However, Michael Stern disputed this story, providing a different account. According to Stern, his wife had been saving money for their daughter's future expenses, such as education, a wedding, or a home, since Sarah's birth. They stored the cash at home in a shoebox, which contained old and worn bills that didn't seem significant at the time. After his wife's passing, Stern gave the box of money to Sarah, advising her to deposit the old and worn bills into the bank. Sarah followed his advice, putting some of the money in her checking account for daily expenses and renting a safety deposit box for the rest. She intended to use the money to fund her university education and travel the world. Michael firmly denied any claim to the money for his own use. The discovery of the missing student's large sum of money led investigators to suspect that someone might have targeted her for financial gain. They decided to investigate her financial transactions, including her safety deposit box and bank records. The investigation revealed that Sarah had withdrawn a substantial amount of money from an ATM just a few days before she disappeared. She also visited her bank to withdraw cash from her safety deposit box. The detectives were surprised to find that Sarah was not alone during her bank visit. Bank surveillance footage showed that Liam accompanied her. This raised new questions, as Liam had failed to mention this visit during previous questioning. When asked about it, Liam hesitated before explaining that Sarah trusted only him and had asked for his accompaniment because she was afraid to carry a large amount of cash home alone. His explanation seemed reasonable, and his behavior appeared natural. A security camera at a house opposite the Stern residence captured footage of the street and neighboring yards. The footage showed that Liam stayed at Sarah's house until 7 p.m., then left for work and didn't return. The silver sedan was seen leaving the garage around 11 p.m. that night. About a month after Sarah's disappearance, an acquaintance named Anthony came to the police station with a disturbing story. Unaware of the events, Anthony had been out of town for several weeks. It turned out that Anthony had been classmates with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduation, pursued a passion for filmmaking, remaining in touch only with Liam, who shared his interest in cinema. About a month and a half before Sarah disappeared, Liam visited Anthony, and they spent an evening brainstorming ideas for a teenage horror movie. Liam came up with a plot where a girl tells a friend about a large sum of money she has, and the friend gains her trust before strangling her and dumping her body in a river. Anthony liked the idea, and they wrote a couple of pages of the script that night. Anthony later moved on to another project, forgot about the story, and left town to work as a camera assistant on a film shoot. When he returned, Liam unexpectedly called him, asking if the police had questioned him about anything. Anthony was surprised by the question and learned about Sarah's disappearance and the suspicious circumstances surrounding it. He decided to go to the police himself. The authorities instructed Anthony to have an open conversation with Liam and try to get him to confess. To do this, Anthony invited Liam to work on a project that required renting expensive camera equipment, knowing Liam's desire to be in a movie. Liam took the bait and suggested they meet in person to discuss the details. The police installed a hidden camera in Anthony's car and told him to carefully get Liam to confess when they met. When Liam got into the car, he looked around cautiously, then handed Anthony an envelope containing $2,000 in old bills, saying it was for the filming equipment. Anthony asked where Liam got the old money, and Liam hesitated before admitting that it belonged to Sarah, saying that he and Preston had taken it from her house because the dead don't need it. Although Liam didn't provide further details, his admission was enough evidence for the police to arrest him and Preston on suspicion of being accomplices. Preston agreed to cooperate with the authorities and made a deal with the prosecution. He admitted to helping his friend Liam cover up the evidence and dispose of Sarah's body, but claimed he did not participate in the murder itself. According to Preston, Liam had planned to steal Sarah's inheritance as soon as he found out about it. Sarah had kept the inheritance a secret, even from her best friend, but revealed it to Liam when she started planning a trip to Canada. Liam convinced her to withdraw the money from the bank and keep it in a home safe, and even borrowed a significant amount from her before the murder. When Sarah's father was away on a business trip, Liam put his plan into action. He promised Preston $25,000 to help him, but planned to do the actual killing himself. Liam convinced Sarah to withdraw the money, and then spent the day with her, waiting for the right moment to strike. He locked her dog in another room, approached Sarah from behind, and strangled her. The crime unfolding was more complicated than anticipated. Initially, Sarah, being athletic and strong, put up a fierce struggle until she lost consciousness. However, she would occasionally show signs of life, making it difficult for the perpetrator to be certain of her demise. It took around half an hour to confirm that Sarah had stopped breathing. After leaving Sarah's house, Liam went to work, at which point Preston entered the house through the back door, avoiding the camera's view. Preston dragged Sarah's body to the garage and cleaned up the room. A few hours later, Liam returned to Sarah's house, took a small safe from her room, and placed the body in the car. He drove away carefully to avoid being captured on the neighbor's camera. Liam met Preston at the bridge, where they disposed of the body in the river. They wiped down the steering wheel and drove back to Liam's house in Preston's car to divide the stolen money. However, they were disappointed to find only $110,000 in the safe, rather than the expected $100,000. Despite this, they decided not to spend the old bills immediately to avoid raising suspicion. Preston buried the safe in a local park, and they only used the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. Despite confessing, Liam McAtasney denied involvement, trying to blame his friend instead. His lawyer claimed he was innocent, suggesting Taylor had acted alone. Since Sarah's body was never found and her disappearance was still unclear, there was a small chance she was still alive, having vanished without her belongings. However, a search of Liam's house found a key matching the buried safe. Identified by Preston, the trial lasted over 2 years, but despite the lack of a body and Liam's denials, his guilt was proven through evidence. The script written months before the incident, the key found in his home, his recorded words in Anthony's car, and the old bills he provided all contributed to the verdict. Furthermore, fingerprints of both Preston and Liam were found inside the safe, and a colleague testified that Liam was absent from work that night, asking to be covered. Liam McAtasney was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His accomplice, who did not directly participate in the crime, received an 18-year sentence for obstructing justice and hindering the investigation. Preston Taylor will be eligible for parole in at least 15 years. The case of Jessica Bardwell. A team of detectives and FBI agents visited a remote ranch in Farmersville, North Texas, in the evening, and they immediately began searching the wooded area. They soon found a piece of metal covering something, and nearby there was an overwhelming smell of decay. Although the smell was unbearable, the officers were prepared for what they might find. When they removed the metal, they found a female body wrapped in a blue sheet, covered with a blanket and 2 red and gold towels stained with blood. A pile of trash mixed with dirt served as a makeshift grave for the victim. It was clear that the perpetrator was inexperienced, as their attempts to hide the body only made it more noticeable. The condition of the body was terrible, having decomposed significantly under the scorching sun for a week. It took experts 7 days to officially identify the victim, and they did so by requesting dental records of the presumed victim. The investigation suggested that the discovered body belonged to 27-year-old Jessica Bardwell. The examination revealed that her death was the result of a crime, but the exact cause could not be determined due to the body's advanced decomposition. Notably, an anonymous informant provided crucial information that led to the discovery of the body, but their identity was not disclosed. Jessica Bardwell, a beloved daughter and friend, had seemingly vanished from the home she shared with her boyfriend, Jason Lowe. Her father, Gary, sensed trouble and set out from Mississippi to Texas to search for her, following his instincts that she was in danger. Let's start from the beginning. Gary had an exceptionally strong bond with his daughter Jessica. He recalled being deeply moved when she was born on September 10, 1988, in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Gary and Carla Bardwell were wonderful parents to Jessica and her older brother Brandon. The siblings got along well, with Brandon always protecting his little sister from bullies. Their grandmother, Kitty, who adored her grandchildren, would often visit and engage in fun activities with them, such as reading books, sharing life stories, and playing games. In short, they were a quintessential American family. Jessica was a happy and kind girl with a unique style. She dreamed of working in the beauty industry and opening her own salon. When she was 14, her parents got divorced, and she chose to live with her father, Gary, with whom she had a warm and trusting relationship. Gary, a firefighter, remarried Gina, who was an excellent homemaker and took good care of Jessica. As Jessica grew up, she wanted to be independent and moved to Orange Beach, Alabama. where she worked as a waitress at Cobalt Restaurant. She kept in touch with her father, who would visit her and take her boating and fishing. Jessica's friend and restaurant manager, Kimberly, admired the strong bond between Jessica and her father. At Cobalt, Jessica met Terry, and they started dating. However, she soon fell for Jason, a friend of Terry's, and left him for Jason. This new relationship turned her life around, and Jason promised to help her achieve her dreams. He got a job in Dallas, Texas, and Jessica followed him, without telling her father, afraid of disappointing him. In Dallas, Jessica searched for a new job and looked for a location for her salon. She and Jason planned to get married and buy a house. However, her relationship with her father suffered, and she stopped answering his calls. Gary was worried and eventually found out about Jason and Jessica's move. He tried to re-establish contact, but discovered that Jason controlled all communications. Months later, Jessica contacted her father, and he met Jason when they visited Pascagoula. Gary disliked Jason and tried to convince Jessica not to return to Texas, but she insisted on following her dreams. Despite Gary's concerns, Jessica seemed happy and didn't show any signs of distress. Gary's fatherly instincts kicked in after meeting his daughter's boyfriend, Jason, prompting him to write a song titled "Taken" for his daughter. Unfortunately, his concerns proved justified. 4 months after Jessica moved to Texas, she suddenly stopped responding to her family's calls. The final straw came on May 8th, when she failed to wish her mother and stepmother a happy Mother's Day, a gesture uncharacteristic of her. Gary sensed something was terribly wrong, especially since she missed a cherished family holiday. He immediately called Jason, who claimed he didn't know Jessica's whereabouts, citing their open relationship as the reason. However, Gary knew this was a lie, as Jason controlled every aspect of Jessica's life. The next morning, Gary drove to Texas, suspecting Jason's involvement in his daughter's disappearance. He messaged Jason, warning him that he would face consequences if Jessica wasn't home when he arrived. Upon reaching their apartment, Gary found no trace of Jessica or her belongings, but Jason continued to feign ignorance. Later, Kimberly shared disturbing details about Jessica's relationship with Jason. He had wasted money on drugs and entertainment, and his promises to help Jessica achieve her dreams had vanished. In private, Jason was rude and aggressive, leading to frequent conflicts with Jessica. With Jessica still missing, Gary filed a missing person report with the Richardson police. Detective Hiram Hall, a father of 3 daughters, led the investigation into her disappearance. The police spoke with Jason several times, inspecting the house, but found no trace of Jessica. Jason claimed he last saw Jessica on May 8th, leaving without explanation, possibly to visit her parents. However, investigators discovered that Jessica had actually sold her car 3 weeks earlier, a fact Jason knew about since he was present at the sale. This raised suspicions, prompting the police to interrogate him again on May 12th. During the investigation, police found cocaine in Jason's kitchen and a suspicious substance in his garage. The Audi car inside the garage had mud stains and a detached bumper. Although the car was empty, the police suspected Jessica might be inside. The smell of decomposition led them to examine the trunk, where they found blood stains. Jason claimed he got stuck in the mud while searching for Jessica, but he couldn't explain the blood in the car or the cocaine in his home. Given the circumstances, the case was reclassified as a homicide to prevent Jason from fleeing. Despite the lack of a body, the police charged Jason with homicide, and the search for Jessica continued. Eventually, her body was found, and the autopsy report revealed that she had been brutally discarded. A year later, Jason claimed the incident was an accident and hoped for the jury's understanding. However, the prosecution faced challenges in building their case, and the defense staged a mock trial that resulted in a not guilty verdict. After Jason revealed the location of Jessica's body, he received a shorter prison sentence, allowing her family to give her a dignified burial. Jessica's father, Gary, was consumed by grief and anger, seeking justice in a unique way. He took a photo of Jason, placed it on a stump, and hit it with a 12-pound sledgehammer, finding some small comfort in this form of emotional release. Gary struggled to cope with his loss, feeling guilty for not persuading Jessica to stay away from her controlling boyfriend, Jason. He had hoped she would break up with him, but she had chosen to give him another chance instead. During the trial, Gary replayed their last conversations in his mind, including a call from Jessica when she admitted he was right about Jason after an argument. Although she had briefly found shelter with a friend, she had returned to Jason the next day. Gary had reluctantly accepted her decision, a choice he would later regret deeply. When Mr. Bardwell arrived in Texas, he was determined to seek justice. During her opening statement, Prosecutor Cynthia Walker described Jason as a complex person who few people wanted to associate with due to his history of substance abuse, which often triggered violent outbursts. It's possible that Jessica was a victim of one such episode. Prosecutor Wes Wynn called upon Jason's former girlfriends to testify. They corroborated the prosecution's claims, sharing their own fears of Jason's aggression, which was fueled by jealousy. Like Jessica, Jason had isolated them from their loved ones and exhibited manipulative and deceitful behavior. These traits ultimately led each of them to end their relationships with him, which required careful planning and caution. However, Jason was able to present himself as a superior individual to many people, deceiving them about his true nature. In response to the allegations, Jason revealed that he had started using drugs at the age of 13, influenced by his friends, which led to addiction. Despite his struggles, he managed to earn multiple degrees and secure a job with a well-known global company, demonstrating his determination to not let his addiction define him. Jason admitted to planning to fulfill Jessica's dream of building a family together, motivated by his love for her. However, the prosecution presented a different image of Jason, contradicting his claims. The investigation revealed that Jessica died between May 1st and May 3rd, likely on the day she argued with her neighbors, the Jordans, and was last seen alive. After the argument, Jason moved Jessica's body to the garage and placed it in the trunk of his car, where it stayed for several days. Forensic evidence confirmed that the blood found in the Audi belonged to Jessica. Jason then transported her body to a remote farm and hid it in the nearby woods. The sheet used to wrap the body was later found to be part of Jessica's bedding set, which Jason still had in his home, despite Jessica's death and her body decomposing in the car. After Jessica's death, the accused continued to see multiple women, and his phone contained evidence of this, including flirtatious messages and intimate photos that he had sent to them before meeting them at his apartment. Jason claimed that he was trying to distract himself from his emotional pain and guilty feelings by using substances, which he believed made dealing with reality easier. The investigation discovered Jason's presence at Jessica's time of death through a clever tactic. Because Jason had consistently denied any involvement, detectives asked Tommy Jordan, someone who knew Jason, to have a conversation with him while being monitored. During this conversation, Jason finally admitted to making a terrible mistake with Jessica, expressing guilt and remorse, although he only acknowledged culpability for criminal negligence. Jason's statement to the police was seen as a confession, and they realized they had caught him. Jason made a deal with the prosecution and revealed the location of Jessica's body. At the trial, he finally told his side of the story. According to Jason, he and Jessica had taken libido-enhancing pills that evening and got intimate in the shower. During the shower, Jason slipped and Jessica fell, hitting her head on the bathtub. She complained of feeling hot and dizzy and sat down. Jason claimed he offered to call an ambulance, but Jessica refused, saying she just needed to rest and sleep. However, the next morning, Jason found her lying on his chest, unconscious and not breathing. Despite his attempts to revive her, Jessica was dead. Scared of being accused of murder, Jason hesitated to call the police and decided to take matters into his own hands. He initially left the body in his car and later hid it on a remote farm, carelessly dumping her in a pile of trash without a proper burial. However, Jason's story was not believable due to his questionable character and the medical examination findings. The autopsy revealed that Jessica had suffered severe head injuries that couldn't have resulted from just falling in the shower, indicating that Jason had attempted to cover up evidence of physical abuse. As a result, his entire story was proven to be a fabrication. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jason guilty. Judge Scott Becker sentenced Jason Lowe to 50 years in prison, a reduced term due to a plea deal with the prosecution. Jason won't be eligible for parole until at least 2041. At the sentencing, Gary, Jessica's father, felt relieved that justice had been served, but was disturbed by Jason's lack of remorse. 2 of Jason's ex-girlfriends, including Chrissy Chambers, were present at the sentencing. Chambers expressed sympathy for Jessica, warning her to get out of the relationship if she could. Even now, Jason maintains his innocence, claiming the homicide was an accident. Unfortunately, Jessica didn't recognize Jason's true nature until it was too late. She had grown up with a positive male role model in her father Gary, and didn't realize that some men can be deceitful and violent. This tragic story serves as a warning to women to prioritize their own safety, freedom, and well-being, lest they suffer a devastating fate, not just for themselves, but for their loved ones. The case of Natalie Holloway. 18-year-old Natalie Holloway, who disappeared while on a trip to Aruba, an island in the southern Caribbean Sea near Venezuela. In May 2005, a group of 124 students from Mountain Brook High School, accompanied by 7 chaperones, traveled to Aruba to celebrate the start of their adult lives. The students stayed at the Holiday Inn and had access to beaches, palm trees, restaurants, and local entertainment venues. They spent 5 unforgettable days on the island, enjoying themselves with swimming, sunbathing, dancing, and partying. However, on the day of their return, Natalie Holloway was nowhere to be found. Her belongings, phone, and passport were still in the hotel, but she had vanished. Her mother, Elizabeth Twitty, was the first to raise the alarm and reported her concerns to one of the chaperones. Elizabeth recalled that at that moment, her heart sensed something was wrong, as her daughter was obedient and always stayed in touch. Natalie's mother and stepfather immediately flew to Aruba to search for her. Upon arriving, Elizabeth was able to find out more information than the police did, as the authorities seemed uninterested in starting a search. The police told Elizabeth that cases like this are not rare, and that people often miss their planes or get lost in bars or with new acquaintances. However, Elizabeth knew her daughter and was convinced that something was seriously wrong. Natalie Holloway was last seen leaving Carlos and Charlie's nightclub with 17-year-old Jan, a local regular who had offered her a drink. They left with 2 other young men in a silver Honda car. 4 hours later, Natalie's mother, Elizabeth, contacted the police again with concerning information, leading to the detention of the trio. Initially, Van der Slot denied knowing Natalie, but later admitted to leaving the bar with her. They drove around, visited the beach, and then dropped her off near the hotel. His friends, Deepak and SES Kalpo, confirmed his account. Natalie was born on October 21, 1986, in Clinton, Mississippi, to Elizabeth Ann and David Edward Holloway. Her parents loved each other dearly, but divorced after 13 years. Natalie and her brother stayed with their mother, but their father remained supportive emotionally and financially. In 2000, Elizabeth remarried to George Twitty, and Natalie moved to Mountain Brook. The move was smooth, and she made new friends easily due to her sociable nature. Her family was devout, attending church every Sunday, which influenced Natalie's upbringing. Relatives remembered her as kind, modest, and beautiful, with a radiant smile. Natalie was an excellent student, engaged in dance, and participated in various clubs. She dreamed of pursuing a career in medicine and had chosen a local university for a substantial scholarship. At the time, she had promising life prospects and was excited about an upcoming trip. Elizabeth believed her daughter was unlikely to trust a stranger or get into a car with him. Surveillance footage from the bar confirmed her suspicions, showing Natalie's behavior changed after drinking a beverage offered by Jan, suggesting she was under the influence of some substance. The staff at Carlos and Charlie spoke well of Natalie, but Van der Slot had a questionable reputation, often behaving poorly, indulging in gambling, and consuming forbidden substances. He had previously recorded and uploaded videos of his exploits to the internet, but was never held accountable due to his father's influence as a well-known lawyer aiming for a judgeship. The disappearance of Natalie sparked a nationwide search, with the island authorities launching an extensive operation to find her. Volunteers, divers, and specially trained dogs were deployed to cover a vast area. The government even declared a public holiday, and 50 Marines combed the coastline. An airplane equipped with thermal imaging scanned over 40 kilometers of terrain, but Natalie seemed to have vanished into thin air. On June 30th, investigators discovered that there was no footage of Natalie entering a building, which contradicted the statements of Jan and the Kalpoe brothers. The police brought them in for questioning again, and this time, the younger Van der Sloot unexpectedly changed his story. He claimed to have dropped Natalie off at a location without surveillance, not near the hotel, and added that he saw a figure in black moving towards her. Hotel security staff who were on duty that night were detained, with investigators suspecting they might have intercepted Natalie on her way. On June 9th, detectives arrested the suspicious trio, and one of the security guards shared a cell with the Kalpoe brothers. The guard learned a crucial detail. Sedish confessed that he and Deepak had lied to cover for their friend, leaving Jan alone with Natalie on the beach. The security guards were released on June 13th, and on June 17th, another suspect, Steve Gregory Cruz, a DJ, was detained. The police suspected his involvement in Natalie's disappearance. On June 22nd, Paulus van der Sloot was brought in for questioning and detained, but he was released on June 26th due to insufficient evidence. Jan offered a third explanation of the events, trying to shift the blame onto the Kalpoe brothers, claiming he parted ways with Natalie near his home, and she left with them. However, his story was not taken seriously. A lawyer defended Sadish and Deepak, and on July 4th, after a brief trial, the Kalpoe brothers were released. Jan van der Sloot, born on August 6, 1987, in Arnhem, Netherlands, was one of 3 brothers in a large family. He was a good student, excelled in sports, and planned to attend St. Leo University in Florida. Jan's childhood was marked by a strained relationship with his mother, Anita, an art teacher, who considered him an incubator liar. He grew up rebellious, often ran away from home, and fell in with a bad crowd, developing a penchant for gambling. Despite this, he presented himself as cool and fearless to his friends. Locals were suspicious of Jan's lenient attitude, fearing it would lead to trouble. However, he was popular among girls and often took advantage of them. As the investigation into the suspects continued, the search for Natalie persisted. U.S. authorities closely monitored the progress and provided substantial financial support. Despite the scrutiny, the Holloway family was desperate to find their daughter alive and announced a monetary reward, which initially started at $50,000. As hope dwindled, the reward increased to $1 million. Additionally, $100,000 was offered for information leading to the location of her remains, which later increased to $250,000. During this time, the investigation hit several dead ends. However, after the reward announcement, new witnesses emerged. One claimed to have seen Jan with the Kalpoe brothers at a local night spot between 2:30 and 3 a.m. Another witness claimed to have seen several suspicious men hiding a woman's body at a dump on the afternoon of May 30th. However, these statements led the investigation astray, and after numerous checks, their claims were not corroborated. On August 26th, the police detained the Kalpoe brothers and another young man, but these actions were unrelated to the case. The arrest was more about intimidation and an attempt to get them to talk. Ultimately, on September 3, 2005, all 4 were released on bail. A week and a half later, the court removed all restrictions and prohibitions, as none provided any substantial leads to the investigation. Jan van der Sloot was detained for 3 months, but after his release, he sought to capitalize on his notoriety by giving interviews and appearing on TV shows. In these appearances, he claimed that Natalie Holloway had flirted with him and offered to have sex. But he declined because he didn't have a condom. However, during one show, he became aggressive and threw a glass at the interviewer. A journalist who was targeted by Jan's glass-throwing incident held a grudge against him and worked with authorities to place a bug in a friend's car. The bug captured Jan confessing to witnessing Natalie's death. He claimed that they had sex on the beach, but afterward, she began shaking, lost consciousness, and eventually died. Jan and a friend then disposed of her body at sea. Despite this confession, Jan managed to avoid consequences by denying the statement on another TV show, claiming he had only told his friend what he wanted to hear. In 2007, Jan released a book, The Case of Natalie Holloway, my own account of her disappearance in Aruba, in which he presented his side of the story and apologized to Natalie's family. By this time, the official investigation had largely stalled. In 2008, 2 new witnesses came forward. The first reported seeing Jan and his father on the beach around 4 a.m. on the night Natalie went missing. The younger van der Sloot appeared disheveled, and the witness saw him arguing with his father in a car before they drove away. However, Paulus van der Sloot had an alibi for the night in question. The second witness was Jan's former girlfriend, who recalled that Jan had once made a suspicious comment about being able to dispose of someone's body. However, this was not considered a strong lead, given Jan's history of lying and exaggeration. Jan and the Kalpoe brothers were detained multiple times, but released due to lack of evidence. The Holloway family hired a private investigator who, along with Natalie's father, conducted their own investigation, interviewing locals and searching the landfill. During this time, they uncovered several oversights by the local police, including failure to interview Natalie's classmates or hotel room neighbors. It was also discovered that someone had used Natalie's hotel key several times on the night of her disappearance, and that her mobile phone and toothbrush had been left behind. A male DNA was found on her toothbrush. The investigation ultimately revealed that the Aruban authorities had been negligent in their handling of the case. Jan's father, Paulus, died of a heart attack in 2010, reportedly due to the stress and shame of his son's actions. After his father's death, Jan attempted to blackmail the Holloway family, offering to reveal the truth for $250,000. The family agreed to meet with him and paid an advance of $25,000. During the meeting, Jan provided yet another version of events, claiming that Natalie had resisted his advances, which enraged him, and that he had pushed her, causing her to hit her head and lose consciousness. He then buried her body in a building foundation. However, the police investigation revealed that Jan's claims were false, as the house he pointed to had long been built, and its foundation was fully set at the time of Natalie's disappearance. Jan fled to Peru with the money, but unfortunately, the consequences did not catch up with him immediately. On June 1, 2010, the body of 21-year-old Stephanie Flores Ramirez was discovered in a hotel room in Lima, Peru. She had been severely beaten, and the cause of her death was determined to be a neck fracture. Surveillance cameras quickly helped identify the criminal, and soon after, Jan was arrested and taken to the police station. He explained that he had met Stephanie at a casino, and after playing poker, they decided to continue their acquaintance in his hotel room. However, when Stephanie accessed his laptop and discovered his connection to Natalie Holloway's death, she became frightened and wanted to leave. Jan realized what had alarmed her, became enraged, and struck her until she died. Jan was captured on his way to Chile and confessed to the crime on the 4th day of his arrest. The news shocked residents in the US, especially as it occurred exactly 5 years after Natalie's disappearance. Elizabeth Twitty expressed her grief, noting that justice had finally been served albeit at the cost of another life. Jan was sentenced to 28 years in prison on January 11, 2012, for the premeditated crime against Stephanie Flores Ramirez. He was also ordered to pay $75,000 in compensation to the Ramirez family. In 2014, Jan was transferred from Pedras Gordas prison to Chalat prison, where he met a Peruvian woman who visited another inmate in 2010. They got married, but it turned out Jan was using her for his own purposes. He showed no signs of remorse or guilt for his actions. Meanwhile, in June 2011, David Holloway filed a petition in an Alabama court to have his daughter Natalie, who had gone missing in 2005, declared legally deceased. Natalie's mother opposed this, hoping that Jan would confess to the crime and face trial. After a hearing, Judge Alan King ruled in favor of the declaration on January 12, 2012. On June 8, 2023, Jan was extradited to the United States and placed in Hoover City Jail in Alabama. The next day, he was charged with extortion and wire fraud, but he pleaded not guilty. However, on October 18, 2023, he entered a plea agreement admitting to murdering Natalie Holloway. He confessed to fatally bludgeoning her with a cinder block on May 30, 2005, and disposing of her body in the ocean for sharks to consume. Unfortunately, the confession made as part of the plea deal could not be used in court. Jan was sentenced to 20 years, which would run concurrently with his prison term in Peru. Natalie Holloway's disappearance remains one of the most notorious missing person cases in the US, and it is still an open case in Aruba. A series of cover-ups, corrupt deals, and bureaucratic delays effectively allowed the murder of an innocent young woman to go unpunished, despite global attention to the investigation. The case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, Mexico. She was the second of 3 children to parents Maria del Sacramento Saganon and Manuel Perez. Raised alongside her older brother Javier and younger sister Ana, the family lived modestly, but provided their children with a good education and motivated them to aspire to a better life. Abril excelled in school, showed a talent for mathematics and entrepreneurial skills, and dreamed of obtaining a high-quality higher education to secure a well-paying job with career advancement opportunities. After finishing high school, Abril was admitted to the most prestigious university in Nuevo León, where she earned a master's degree in finance and business administration. Upon graduating, she was hired in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. A few years later, she ventured into digital sales and quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was young, beautiful, successful, ambitious, and steadily advancing towards the life she had always dreamed of. She built a brilliant career, supported her family, and was full of plans for the future. However, her personal life remained unsettled, which disappointed her loved ones. Nevertheless, she was confident she would find true love and live a long, happy life. Little did Abril know how her marriage to the perfect man would turn out. Abril met Juan Carlos in the mid-1990s, when her career was taking off. They were both ambitious, which created a strong connection between them. He was captivated by her beauty, charm, kindness, and intelligence, while she was drawn to his sharp intellect and determination. As their companies collaborated on projects, they crossed paths several times, eventually leading Juan Carlos to realize he was in love with Abril. Through mutual acquaintances, he obtained her phone number and asked her out on a date. The feelings were mutual, and their relationship developed quickly. By 1998, they decided to formalize their relationship with a wedding. By then, they had both achieved considerable career success and were involved in developing online stores, which showed great promise. Their life resembled a true fairy tale, evoking envy and admiration among their peers. After 3 years of marriage, Abril gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. 2 years later, they had a son named Juan Carlos Jr., and another 2 years after that, they welcomed a third child, a boy named Julio Andreas. Despite having 3 young children, Abril managed to balance her parental responsibilities with her career advancement, barely taking any maternity leave. From the outside, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, and happy. However, appearances were deceiving. Behind closed doors, Juan Carlos showed his true nature, being hot-tempered, aggressive, and harsh. He was intolerant of compromise, insisting that everything had to be exactly as he wanted. Over time, his behavior worsened, and verbal altercations escalated into physical confrontations. After the birth of their first daughter, Juan Carlos briefly softened, trying to control his emotions, but it didn't last long. By the time the 3rd child was born, he no longer even tried to be a good father or husband. He would vent his anger on Abril, insulting and belittling her, and her tears seemed to lift his spirits. He regularly physically harmed her, often in ways that left no visible marks on her body, so she could hide the bruises under clothing or mask them with makeup. All this was done to protect his flawless reputation and pride himself on being a model family man, loving husband and father. Abril kept silent for years, trying not to tell even her sister and mother about the ongoing nightmare. She earned well and could have raised the children on her own. But her husband was a wealthy and influential man who could easily take the children away from her through the courts. By 2010, the ideal family facade had begun to crumble, and those who once admired them started to suspect that something was terribly wrong behind closed doors. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed, visibly thin, sleeping poorly, and frequently sporting bruises on her face and body that became increasingly difficult to conceal. In public, Juan Carlos maintained a calm and confident demeanor, pretending that nothing was amiss, playing the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with his wife politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a monster, making it increasingly dangerous for Abril to be near him. Despite pleas from loved ones to divorce him, Abril stubbornly insisted that everything was fine and that she would handle the problems with her husband herself. In 2014, Juan Carlos's career reached its peak when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in the field. After this promotion, the family moved to Mexico City, settling in a large house in one of the capital's best neighborhoods. Their children attended an elite private school, and Abril sincerely hoped that the move would positively affect their relationship. Contrary to expectations, the change only made Juan Carlos continue to physically harm and insult his wife, even doing so in front of their children. He began to groundlessly accuse her of infidelity, and whenever she tried to defend herself, he resorted to using his fists. He monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and later even hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. Over the next 4 years, Abril tried everything to save her marriage, despite her husband's behavior becoming utterly unbearable. She lived in a never-ending nightmare that outwardly seemed like a happy and successful union, with many even envying her for having a prominent, influential, wealthy, and seemingly caring husband. In 2018, the Sanchez family traveled to Monterrey to celebrate Catholic Christmas with the Perez family. However, Juan Carlos behaved towards his wife as he was accustomed, not shying away from her parents, who were horrified by what they witnessed. At that moment, Abril realized things could not continue this way and informed her husband that she would file for divorce once they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos flew into a rage, grabbing her throat and squeezing so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Only her mother, Maria del Soro, entering the room and raising the alarm prevented a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce, moving from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not save her from her tyrannical husband. On the morning of January 4th, while she was still asleep, Juan Carlos entered the bedroom holding a baseball bat, striking her hard on the head and attempting to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but managed to slip off the bed just in time, literally saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body while the eldest son took the bat from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed Abril with a serious concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow, requiring stitches. As soon as his wife and sons left the home, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to explain the situation and asked for help in resolving it. He also posted on his social media page, claiming that his wife had betrayed him, was unfaithful, and intended to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to take all their jointly acquired assets. Moreover, he claimed that his wife had stolen all the money from their home safe, and that when he tried to stop her, she injured him with a knife in the shoulder. As proof of his innocence, Sanchez shared photos of a bloody knife and stains on the floor, but these were later revealed to be fake. The blood was from Abril's own room, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite this, his friends believed him and shared his story on social media, sparking widespread outrage. Meanwhile, Abril had filed a police report against Sanchez, accusing him of attempting to kill her. After being released from the hospital, she moved out of their home with their sons and was granted temporary custody. Their adult daughter, who was in college, also sided with her mother and condemned her father's behavior. Sanchez was ordered to pay a small amount of alimony to Abril and their sons, but he disagreed with the amount. He faced a potential prison sentence, but as an influential businessman, he was confident he would avoid punishment. Abril returned to her parents' home in Monterrey, where she filed for divorce and began offering online consultations to women in similar situations. She planned to open a center for psychological and legal assistance for victims of domestic violence. 8.5 months after the incident, Sanchez was finally arrested and charged with femicide, bodily harm, and attempted murder. He was jailed for over a month, but managed to appeal the pretrial detention decision and was released. During the trial, crucial evidence, including hospital photographs and medical records, was not presented. The judge deemed the testimonies of Abril and her sons insufficient and released Sanchez, stating that his actions did not pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and frightened by the verdict, realizing that her ex-husband had used his connections to secure his release. She sent an official letter to the judge expressing fear for her life, but it had no impact. Immediately after being released, Sanchez began legal proceedings against Abril for custody of their sons, forcing her to return to Mexico City for court sessions. Abril arrived in Mexico City with her children on November 25th, fearing for their safety after a court session. As they drove to the airport, a motorcyclist stopped at a traffic light, pulled out a handgun, and fired twice at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. One bullet grazed their younger son, but none of the children were seriously hurt. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life for over 6 hours. But unfortunately, she died that evening due to severe injuries and significant blood loss. Abril's family, convinced that her ex-husband Juan Carlos was behind the brutal act, urged authorities to arrest him. However, law enforcement stated that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to discuss motives and couldn't claim that it was a hitman sent by Sanchez. The case was not classified as femicide until further investigation, and Juan Carlos remained free. After Abril's death, her children were placed in the care of their maternal relatives, while their father, Juan Carlos Sanchez, prepared to fight for custody in court. Sanchez's soon-to-be ex-wife's sister wrote an angry social media post blaming him for the incident, but her page was quickly blocked and later deleted. Despite this, the family decided to draw public attention to the case. The attack on Abril, which occurred on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence, sparked widespread outrage. People began sharing numerous cases where men had attempted to kill women but were not punished. As a result, the General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into Sanchez and instructed investigators to review the judge's decisions to release him. The judges involved in Sanchez's case were temporarily suspended and later removed from their positions. Mexican politician and women's rights defender Claudia Sheinbaum Parro confirmed that Abril's case had been reclassified as femicide and would be reinvestigated. The judges who had released Sanchez could face consequences for Abril's death if his guilt was proven. Sanchez posted on social media calling for the perpetrator of his ex-wife's death to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. However, his daughter Ana Cecilia left an angry comment, accusing her father of cruelty and sharing photos of her mother taken in the hospital after Sanchez had attacked her with a bat. Despite the media attention, Sanchez was initially left free under a restraining order, required to check in weekly at a police station. However, after he failed to appear, a warrant for his arrest was issued. He used his resources and connections to flee the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Sanchez as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was declared wanted worldwide. An investigation was launched to find the hitman who killed Abril. Street camera footage revealed two cars following her vehicle as she left the courthouse with her children and lawyer. The motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone, but received instructions from individuals in the cars. It took investigators several months to identify some of the participants, and two suspects were finally arrested on March 5, 2020. Surprisingly, they did not resist arrest and began cooperating with authorities, hoping to reduce their sentences. It was confirmed that Sanchez was the mastermind behind the crime, having paid a substantial sum to 7 individuals involved in the act. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the chase cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. Juan Carlos, while in prison, had hired 2 experienced criminals to be his personal bodyguards. After they were released, he rehired them to find people to kill Abril, promising each a large sum of money if they succeeded. Once he had assembled a team, Juan Carlos paid them the promised money and gave them detailed instructions about Abril's route and vehicle. The toughest part was luring Abril to Mexico City, which he achieved by threatening to take her children if she didn't appear in court. Abril showed up in court as planned, but intended to return to Monterrey the same day. Juan Carlos knew this through his connections, but it wasn't until the end of October 2020 that 3 more people involved in the conspiracy were arrested on suspicion of drug distribution. It was later discovered that they were involved in Abril's murder. All the arrested individuals were part of Juan Maldonado's gang, known as Juan Balto, which had protected Sanchez while he was in prison. Maldonado agreed to help kill Abril in exchange for a large reward. He was arrested in November 2020 and began cooperating, confirming that Juan Carlos had hired people to kill Abril. With this new evidence, it was clear that Sanchez was both the client and organizer of the crime. His previous assault on Abril with a bat was reclassified as an attempted murder, leading the court to issue an arrest warrant for him on charges of femicide. By spring 2021, all the participants in the crime had been caught, except for Sanchez, who remained at large. The weapon used in the murder was also found. In total, 9 people from the same criminal group were detained, 7 of whom were directly involved in chasing and shooting Abril. 5 years after Abril's death, Sanchez, the mastermind of the crime, is still on the run, and his whereabouts remain unknown. The person who pulled the trigger was sentenced to 52 years in prison, while 2 others involved in the crime received 50-year sentences each. The other participants are still under investigation, and their fate has yet to be decided. The case of Gabriela Alcano. Gabriela Alcano was born on May 17, 2001, in Santiago, Chile, to Federico Alcano and Carolina Donoso Campos. She was their only child and the first grandchild in a large, loving family. Her uncle Rodrigo became her godfather and was very close to her, Just like her grandfather Carlos, who cherished her, Gabriela grew up in a middle-class family that valued education and provided her with a good upbringing, despite not being wealthy. When Gabriela was just 5 years old, her parents divorced, and she lived with her mother, who dedicated herself to raising her. Her father remarried and had 2 younger sons, but he continued to support Gabriela and her mother financially and remained involved in her life. Gabriela was a kind, friendly, and open child who was a bit shy and modest, but she made friends easily and got along with her peers. She had a lovely appearance that earned her admiration and delight from everyone around her. Gabriela excelled in school, loved music, dancing, and drawing, and her parents encouraged her talents. She enjoyed spending time with her younger brothers at her father's house, which was nearby. And overall, her childhood was a happy and carefree time surrounded by loving family members. At 15, Gabriela fell in love for the first time with Fabian, a fellow student at her school who was only a year older. They started out as a happy couple, walking hand in hand, eating ice cream and stealing kisses. Fabian came from a good family, and his parents were well respected and wanted the best for him. However, Fabian himself was quiet and secretive, avoiding eye contact and preferring not to talk to others. This led many to assume he was shy, but it's likely he struggled with social anxiety. When Gabriela introduced Fabian to her father, he approved of her choice, seeing Fabian as calm, responsible, and rational. The father had a serious talk with Fabian, asking him to take care of Gabriela, and promising not to harm her or let others harm her. Fabian promised to do so. At first, their relationship was loving and calm, with Fabian genuinely trying to be attentive and caring. However, this peace didn't last. After a few months, Fabian's true nature emerged, and he became controlling and cruel. He tried to dictate every aspect of Gabriela's life, became jealous, and decided who she could and couldn't hang out with. He monitored her phone, demanding immediate responses to his calls and messages, and would throw tantrums if she didn't comply. For the first 6 months of their relationship, Gabriela downplayed her boyfriend Fabian's frequent outbursts of anger and jealousy, thinking they were temporary and that he would eventually go back to being the kind and caring person she fell in love with. She tried to accommodate all his demands, hoping that his behavior would improve. However, Fabian only became more aggressive and volatile over time. He started to emotionally wear Gabriela down, and his abuse eventually escalated beyond verbal aggression. He would physically intimidate her, slapping her, pulling her hair, and grabbing her hands. Although these actions often left no visible marks, friends began to notice bruises on her wrists and shoulders, evidence of Fabian's rough handling. As Gabriela struggled to cope with the abuse, she became withdrawn and depressed. Her friends and family noticed the change in her, seeing the tears in her eyes and the sadness that had replaced her former smile. She started distancing herself from others, avoiding contact with people Fabian had forbidden her from speaking to. Gabriela repeatedly tried to have conversations with her boyfriend Fabian, but it was unsuccessful. She even broke up with him multiple times, only to be coerced back into the relationship by Fabian. This pattern of breakups, stalking, and threats continued for over a year. In 2017, Fabian got into trouble for physically attacking a classmate outside of school. He was accused of abuse and assault, and faced possible jail time. However, the case was settled out of court, and Fabian was expelled from school, forced to complete his education through homeschooling. After this event, Gabriela finally decided to end the toxic relationship for good. However, Fabian refused to accept it. He apologized, made empty promises to change, and begged her to take him back. When Gabriela rejected him, Fabian resorted to stalking, blackmail, and threats in an attempt to control her and maintain their relationship. Fabian stalked Gabriela at her school and home, even attempting to break into her bedroom through the window. He bombarded her with dozens of calls, texts, voice messages, and social media messages, making constant threats and tearful apologies in an effort to control her. Despite his harassment, Gabriella remained firm in her decision to end the relationship. Fabian would occasionally vanish for weeks, giving Gabriella a glimmer of hope that he had finally moved on. However, he would inevitably reappear, terrorizing her and refusing to leave her be. He followed her everywhere, showing up unexpectedly and causing disturbing scenes. As a result, Gabriella became terrified of being alone, always ensuring she was accompanied by friends or family. She would go to her mother's workplace after school, and they would head home together. When she needed to travel, she would ask her father or uncle to escort her. This ordeal continued for months, leaving Gabriella drained and exhausted, though she tried not to show it. A series of tragic events began in early 2018, when the Alcano family was devastated by a terrible crime. A burglar broke into Federico's home, where his second wife lived, and murdered her while the children were at school, and Federico was at work. The perpetrator, a neighbor with a prior criminal record, was apprehended immediately. Gabriella and her mother stepped in to support Federico and his children during this difficult time. This tragedy temporarily shifted Gabriella's attention away from Fabian, who had mysteriously disappeared around the same time. Meanwhile, Gabriella was also busy preparing for entrance exams, driven by her ambition to attend one of Santiago's top universities and pursue a career in journalism or advertising. The tragedy was only the beginning of a series of devastating events for the Alcano family. By May 2018, Fabian, Gabriella's ex-boyfriend, began stalking her relentlessly. He would climb over her home's fence or show up at the supermarket or mall, making her feel unsafe everywhere she went. Gabriella was terrified and sent screenshots of threatening messages from Fabian to someone, pleading for help. She confessed her fear for herself and her loved ones, but chose not to tell her family about the stalking and threats, afraid of worrying them. On June 10, 2018, the Alcano family gathered at Carlos's house to celebrate his 80th birthday. However, this joyful family event would ultimately be the last day of life for Gabriella and her mother, Carolina. The evening seemed happy and uneventful, filled with laughter, music, and a large family meal. Gabriella played with her younger brothers and cousins, but appeared troubled and distant. Her uncle Rodrigo noticed her distress and asked if everything was all right. But Gabriella just smiled sadly, shrugged, and said she was nervous without explaining why. Her uncle chose not to press the issue, thinking she would open up when ready, but later deeply regretted this decision. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriella on the forehead, told her he loved her, and assured her she could count on his support in any situation. Then he returned home with his younger children. This was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and his first wife alive. At around 4 a.m. on June 11th, Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, jumped over the fence of his ex-girlfriend Gabriella's house. He planned to sneak into her bedroom through the window and attack her. But just as he was about to enter, the lights turned on and the back door creaked open. Carolina, Gabriella's mother, had been awakened by the noise and was checking on the commotion. Fabian attacked her, pushing her back inside and stabbing her repeatedly. In total, he inflicted 36 stab wounds, mostly to her chest, neck, and head, leaving her with no chance of survival. Carolina managed to scream briefly, which woke up Gabriella, who rushed downstairs to investigate. As she descended, she saw Fabian, covered in blood and enraged. He grabbed her and dragged her down. Gabriella desperately tried to call emergency services on her phone, but Fabian stopped her. He then stabbed her in the chest, piercing her heart, which proved to be a fatal blow. Fabian moved Gabriella's body to the kitchen, where Carolina's lifeless body lay. He attempted to erase his traces by wiping fingerprints and cleaning bloody footprints. He then washed himself and the murder weapon in the bathroom. Finally, he quietly left the house around 5:30 a.m. without being noticed by the neighbors. After Carolina failed to show up for work for 2 days and didn't answer her phone, her colleagues became worried. She was a responsible person and wouldn't just disappear without a reason. her boss contacted Federico, her partner, to ask if he knew what was going on. Federico was shocked and tried calling Carolina, but her phone went unanswered. He also tried calling his daughter, Gabriella's phone, but it was turned off. He then called his brother Rodrigo, who hadn't seen or spoken to the two since Carlos's birthday party. Federico rushed to Carolina's house, which looked empty, but the car was still in the garage. He walked around the house, knocking on doors and peeking through windows, but he didn't want to go inside, even though he had a spare key. Instead, he called the police and asked them to check the house. When the police arrived, they wondered why Federico hadn't used his spare key to enter the house. Federico admitted he was afraid of what he might find inside. At 11 a.m., he finally opened the door and went in with the officers. That's when they discovered the bodies of Carolina and Gabriella on the kitchen floor. They had been dead for over a day. Federico was overwhelmed with grief and desperately called for an ambulance, pleading with someone to save his loved ones. However, the officers had to calm him down, and his agitated behavior raised suspicions. As a result, he was taken outside to a police car for further questioning. When Federico tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he demanded to know why. It was then that he realized he was being treated as the prime suspect in a double murder investigation. Rodrigo soon arrived at the scene and was shocked to find that his brother was being held by the police. He was devastated by the news of his niece's death and couldn't understand why there was no ambulance or any medical assistance being provided. Both Federico and Rodrigo were taken in for questioning, and their alibis were thoroughly investigated. Fortunately, they were eventually cleared of any wrongdoing, as it was established that they were with their family at the time of the crime. Further investigation revealed that Gabriella had been stalked by her ex-boyfriend, with friends providing evidence of threatening messages and voice recordings. Federico remembered the obsessed suitor his daughter had tried to break up with, but he never thought the seemingly harmless boy she had introduced to him was capable of such a horrific crime. The police investigation into Fabian Cesar, the young man, revealed that he had gotten rid of the murder weapon and thrown away clothes with bloodstains. Despite this, his shoes still had tiny blood drops on them, and the pattern on the soles matched prints found at the crime scene. Furthermore, 4 of Gabriella's classmates came forward to say they had heard Fabian threaten Gabriella, stating he would rather kill her than let her go. As the evidence and witness statements mounted, Fabian was forced to admit to the crime. However, he tried to present himself as a lovesick individual who had not meant to harm Gabriella, but rather just wanted to talk to her. He claimed that things got out of control, and he ended up dealing with her mother, who unfortunately became an unwanted witness. After completing the autopsies and necessary tests, the authorities returned the bodies of the victims to their families for burial. At the funeral, hundreds of people gathered to pay their respects to the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriella was buried in the white dress she had always wanted to wear, and Carolina's casket was closed due to the severe mutilation of her face. Fabian's family hired an experienced lawyer who built a strong defense, promising a reduced sentence during the preliminary hearings. The lawyer highlighted Fabian's young age and clean criminal record, arguing that the dispute with his classmate had been resolved out of court. However, the victim's family demanded that Fabian be charged with femicide. The prosecution rejected this charge, as according to Chilean law, femicide only applies when the perpetrator and victim are spouses or live together, which was not the case for the 2 teenagers. Fabian's lawyer claimed that he had acted impulsively and under distress, which could lead to a potential 15-year sentence for double homicide and assault. The Allen family, understandably, wanted the harshest punishment for him. Following the initial court hearings, the judge gave both the prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested that he be released pending trial, but the judge denied this request, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriella's father was furious, having lost 3 women close to him to violent deaths. The lawyer tried to blame the victims, and the authorities seemed willing to accept this. In response, Gabriella's father and uncle, along with women's rights organizations, developed a proposal for Gabriella's law. This law would expand the definition of femicide to include cases where the victims were in romantic relationships with their killers, even if they weren't married or living together. The proposed bill faced opposition because it would mean that perpetrators already in prison for similar crimes could face new charges and lose their eligibility for early release. However, feminist organizations across the country supported the Alim family, staging marches and demonstrations in favor of Gabriella's law. In August 2019, Chile's government introduced amendments to its femicide law, over a year after the devastating murders. These amendments, known as Gabriella's law, included 15 key changes that were later approved by Congress. Under this new law, femicide is defined as any violent act, injury, or murder committed against a woman due to gender-based hatred, regardless of her relationship with the perpetrator. The law also considers additional circumstances, such as the victim being a minor or having health issues, to be aggravating factors. In April 2022, Fabian Ceres went on trial for attacking his ex-girlfriend and her mother 4 years prior. Thanks to Gabriella's law, the defense had no grounds to challenge the charges. Fabian was subsequently convicted of femicide under aggravating circumstances, as one of the victims was a minor, and also of double homicide and assault. On April 20th, Fabian received a life sentence with no possibility of parole. The case of Lily James. Lily James was born in May 2002 in Yamba, New South Wales, Australia. She was the beloved first child of the close-knit James family, especially adored by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up by the ocean with her younger brother Max, Lily was known for her active and enduring nature, with a passion for swimming. Her father, who coached water polo at an Anglican girls' school, supported her interest. Her friends remembered her as sociable, friendly, and excelling in her studies, always willing to help others, which made her very popular. In her upper school years, Lily's achievements in academics, sports, and community life were recognized, and she was considered one of the best students. Her incredible talent to excel in all areas of activity was undeniable. She also had a passion for the dramatic arts, which led her to participate in the theatre and dance club. She was eventually invited to perform at the famous Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events. During the event, Lily impressed the audience with her rendition of a monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth, showcasing her skills, charisma, and allure, and securing second place in the theatre category. In 2018, Lily passed her beginner's driving test, adding to her list of accomplishments. Her athletic successes were also noteworthy, as she began to pursue water polo professionally, earning the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category. Her parents were thrilled with her successes and celebrated each accomplishment grandly. By her senior year, Lily had decided to focus on a sports career, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to pursue a bachelor's degree in sports business management. In 2021, Lily started a new job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School to gain teaching experience and spice up her college routine. Thanks to her youth, vibrant personality, and love for sports, she quickly connected with her colleagues, the administration, and her students, trying to find a unique approach to each student and highlight their strengths. It was during this time that Lily met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach, who caught her attention. Initially, their interaction was friendly and limited to mutual greetings, but it later developed into a romance. Lily fell in love, unaware of Paul's true nature. He showered her with compliments, gave her flowers, and organized evenings together. They agreed to keep their relationship private due to school policy and Lily's personal beliefs. However, over time, rumors began to spread, and Lily discovered that Paul had broken their agreement and portrayed her in a negative light. She felt betrayed and humiliated, so she confronted Paul and ended the relationship. On October 26, 2023, the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents at 4:30 a.m. announcing that the school would be closed until the end of the week due to a critical incident. 2 hours later, a second notification reassured families that none of the students were involved in the incident. However, graduating students sitting for exams were exempt from the closure. The school provided psychological support to those affected by the situation. A 24/7 consultation center was set up in the school library to provide assistance. On Thursday and Friday, forensic teams thoroughly searched the school building and surrounding area. Access to the gym was restricted, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition. The reason for the school's closure was slowly revealed. On October 25, 2023, around midnight, the body of 20-year-old Lily James, the school's water polo coach, was found in the school shower. She had last been seen alive at 7 p.m. Surveillance cameras showed someone following her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left alone and exited the school. Lily's parents raised the alarm when she failed to contact them, and the police were informed. A night guard discovered her body in a pool of blood with severe head injuries. After recovering from the shock, he called emergency services. Later, detectives invited a family friend to identify the body, which was difficult due to the severity of the injuries. The news of Lily's death sparked an outpouring of grief from the community. Her home was filled with friends, neighbors, and acquaintances offering support to her family. Locals also paid their respects, leaving flowers and toys outside her home, creating a memorial. In a shocking twist, another tragic death occurred on October 27, 2023, at 8 a.m., just 11 miles from the scene of Lily's death. A man's remains were discovered on the rocks of Diamond Bay Reserve, near Vaucluse, an eastern suburb of Sydney. After the police were called, a rescue team was quickly assembled, including a bomb squad, Marine Corps, and a rescue helicopter. At 3:30 p.m., they recovered the man's body and took it to forensic experts for identification. Due to the severity of his injuries from a high fall, visual identification was not possible, so fingerprints were used instead. The experts suspected the man's identity, but they needed confirmation. Eventually, they identified the body as 24-year-old Paul, who was suspected of committing a crime against Lily James. Investigators now had to piece together the connection between the two fatal incidents and uncover what had happened between them. Paul's later attempts to make amends and apologize were rebuffed by Lily, who remained unforgiving. She took comfort in the fact that their brief relationship had at least revealed his true nature to her. Born in 1999 in the Netherlands, Paul came from a wealthy and prominent family. When his father's job required a move to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family relocated. As an only child, he received excessive attention and pampering, which contributed to his selfish and entitled personality. Paul thrived academically and athletically at St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he excelled in cricket and eventually became team captain. He was also involved in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While some of his peers found his confidence off-putting, he was charming and charismatic around girls. After graduating in 2017, Paul landed a job as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey. By early 2018, he took over the management of these sports teams. Despite feeling confident in his new role, Paul suddenly resigned and returned home to his family for unknown reasons. Back home, Paul pursued further education, earning a master's degree in sports management. During a conversation with old friends, he revealed that he had honed his coaching skills, which led to a lucrative job offer from his former employer. By early 2020, Paul returned to his old school. Upon his return to Australia, Paul reunited with a former friend, and they decided to split housing costs. Paul preferred shared living despite being able to afford a solo apartment. Their economically priced apartment was in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, the friends got along, socializing at bars after work. However, a few months later, tensions arose, and Paul decided to live alone due to their conflict. The Theson's son, Paul, felt isolated despite being constantly surrounded by people. His parents suspected he had not had a serious romantic relationship. In March 2020, an 18-month lockdown in Australia. Paul was stuck in the country, unable to visit his family due to the risk of infection. The strict quarantine measures affected every aspect of life, forcing Paul to rely on himself. By summer 2021, life had returned to normal. However, it became apparent that the isolation had taken a toll on Paul's relationships. When he resumed his activities, people noticed a change in his character and behavior. Paul bounced back, becoming a key player on the hockey team and maintaining an active lifestyle, even appearing in match advertisements. Paul's behavior became increasingly disturbing. Friends and acquaintances reported seeing him lash out in uncontrollable anger, a side of him they had never witnessed before. Rumors also circulated at school that he had an inappropriate interest in his female students, often flirting with them and making them feel uncomfortable. Despite this, Paul was still highly regarded for his coaching skills, which significantly contributed to the team's success in the Australian Hockey League. However, his personal life began to unravel when his girlfriend Lily ended their relationship after he was put on trial. The investigation into Paul's involvement in her murder quickly gained momentum. Surveillance cameras inside and outside the area where the body was found played a crucial role in identifying him as the prime suspect. The police also tracked his movements using his cell phone's GPS and contacted his service provider to determine his last known location. The police were also eager to find the victim's phone, hoping it would contain clues about the events leading up to her death. After tracing the locations of the devices, they reconstructed the timeline of events and found that Paul had purchased a hammer at a hardware store a couple of days before the attack. It appeared that Paul was consumed by anger and decided to confront the girl violently. Lily's innocence in the situation was clear, but the events that unfolded were as follows. On the morning of October 25th, Lily went to the university and then to her job in the afternoon. Meanwhile, her ex-boyfriend rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school. He didn't enter the building because he had no classes. Instead, he waited in the car. After the students left the building, the perpetrator walked to the gym, hiding a hammer under his jacket. He waited for Lily to finish her training, then followed her when she went to freshen up and take a shower. This was when Lily was most vulnerable, and the perpetrator attacked her, striking her head. According to pathologists, her death was instantaneous, and she did not suffer. An hour later, he gathered Lily's personal belongings in a backpack and left the building. He got into his car and drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the hammer in a garbage container. Security cameras recorded him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. Paul's last known location, as tracked by investigators, was The Gap, a cliff in Sydney's eastern suburb of South Head. The Gap is a popular tourist spot, but it's also infamous for its history of suicides. At around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to someone called James, which would ultimately lead to the discovery of the girl's body. It's unclear why Paul did this. Possibly he felt remorseful and wanted to ensure the girl received help. Or maybe he was simply telling her parents where they could find their daughter. He made a brief emergency call an hour after the incident, but hung up. He then went to a cliff and took his own life, which had been a decision he had been considering for a long time. When the police arrived, they found the personal belongings of him and his former lover, as well as a rented car parked nearby. It seemed clear that he was no longer alive, possibly due to his inability to cope with his guilt or face the consequences of his actions. The priority was now to find his body. A search operation began on October 26th, at 9 a.m., with police helicopters and boats patrolling the coastline and cordoning off the area around the cliff at Diamond Bay. However, no body was found on the first day. The next day, his body washed up on the rocks of the reserve. After an autopsy, Paul was officially declared responsible for Lily James's death. Although it was impossible to hold him accountable due to his own death, the criminal case was closed. His parents received his body and decided to cremate him and scatter his ashes in Sydney, rather than returning him to the Netherlands. Lily's funeral was held on November 17, 2023, at her former school in Hurstville, where around 500 people gathered to bid farewell to a loved one, friend, and coach. The school administration arranged a live broadcast of the ceremony. In line with Lily's lively and vibrant personality, her family requested that attendees wear bright colors instead of traditional dark attire. The ceremony was filled with heartfelt tributes to Lily, as speakers shared warm and sincere words about her. The James family expressed gratitude to everyone who had supported them during their difficult time. Outside the building, students and colleagues created a makeshift memorial featuring Lily's favorite flowers, accompanied by farewell letters as a sign of respect and admiration. After the investigation into Lily's tragic death was completed, the school management sent a follow-up email to parents, apologizing for the impact of the tragedy and assuring them that the incident was unforeseen and would not happen again. While many were shocked that a place of safety had been breached, the administration encouraged students to view this as an isolated incident and to continue their education with renewed enthusiasm. Renowned forensic psychologist Tim Watson-Monroe, an expert in analyzing the minds of both criminals and victims, was consulted about Paul's actions. His analysis revealed that Paul's behavior was characteristic of individuals with inflated self-esteem who cannot accept rejection. According to Monroe, Paul did not act impulsively, but rather deliberately and without remorse. Monroe believed that Paul took his own life to avoid taking responsibility and facing shame for his actions. He described Paul as a narcissistic individual with psychopathic tendencies. Monroe also distinguished Paul's case from the tragic tale of Romeo and Juliet, as their narratives were fundamentally different. Ultimately, Paul's pride and ego clouded his judgment, leading him to make devastating decisions. He failed to appreciate the love and companionship of Lily, and instead chose deceit and betrayal. In the end, Paul's selfishness resulted in the loss of Lily's life, as well as enduring suffering for both their families. His actions were a bitter repayment for the care and attention he received from those who loved him. The case of Michael Van Eck. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that was once a hub for gold miners. He was the only brother to 4 sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Rihanna. Michael grew up in a close-knit family with caring and loving parents who worked hard to provide a decent life for their children. His father was an entrepreneur, and his mother created a nurturing atmosphere at home that encouraged the growth and development of their kids. Michael was a sociable and kind person who did well in school and sports. He even earned a black belt in karate, which gave him confidence and resilience. After completing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a profession that offered good earnings and promising job prospects. He worked at mine number 4 of the Beatrix mine in the small town of Unison. In 2011, at the age of 23, Michael decided to register on a dating site to distract himself from a recent breakup and meet new people. That's when he came across the profile of a sweet and smiling girl who shared his interests. They both disliked loud parties and wanted to find true love and build a strong family. Michael was pleasantly surprised to have found a suitable match online. On April 2nd, he excitedly told his mother that he had a date and was busy preparing for it. He even withdrew 3,000 rand from his account to impress the girl. However, he was uneasy about the unusual meeting spot his friend had chosen, the city cemetery, and didn't mention it to his parents. At around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael said goodbye to his family and left the house, getting into his silver Peugeot 2007, a gift from his parents for his coming of age. When he arrived at the cemetery, the girl was running a bit late, but she looked stunning in a white dress and greeted him with a smile. They chatted comfortably, and she suggested they head to a more secluded area of the cemetery. There, they found a romantic setup, a blanket and a basket of fruit and wine. After having a glass of wine, the girl suddenly kissed Michael. But the pleasant feeling quickly turned to pain and horror as he realized he had fallen into a sinister trap. Chana Van Haren was born in 1991, a time of crisis for her parents. Her mother's pregnancy prompted the couple to put their divorce on hold and try to salvage their relationship. However, their efforts ultimately failed, and their home life continued to deteriorate. Chana's mother made no effort to hide her resentment towards her daughter, viewing her as an unwanted reminder of her husband. After the divorce, Chana's mother took the children and left their father behind. Chana suffered from a severe lack of love and attention from her mother, feeling lonely and misunderstood. Among her siblings, Chana struggled the most, growing increasingly withdrawn and sullen from a young age. She exhibited disturbing behaviors, such as talking about death and creating disturbing drawings. Her grandparents, alarmed by her behavior, suspected supernatural influence and took her to church, where she was subjected to an exorcism ritual. Chana's mental health declined as she got older. At 10, she had a disturbing incident where she threatened a house guest with a knife, prompting her family to seek professional psychiatric help. Fortunately, the medication improved her mood, and her father made an effort to spend quality time with her, even taking her on hunting trips. However, Chana later revealed that she found pleasure in harming animals, often bringing home dead creatures. When Chana turned 12, she formed a problematic friendship with an older man who introduced her to harmful substances and took advantage of her vulnerability. 2 years later, her mother moved to New Zealand, leaving Chana and her siblings in the care of their father and stepmother. At 15, Chana became involved with a 22-year-old man who had an unhealthy interest in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. Fortunately, by her 17th birthday, Chana's life started to take a positive turn. She distanced herself from harmful relationships, successfully graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. After abandoning her interest in Satanism and ceasing to use harmful substances, Chana's emotional well-being significantly improved. She excelled in her studies and eventually secured a job in her chosen field. Chana's new job provided her with a supportive community, including her colleagues and management, where she discovered her talent for visual arts, earning her respect and recognition. She also started dating Warren, giving the impression to outsiders, including her family and close friends, that her life was back on track. However, beneath the surface, her inner struggles persisted. Her father was especially relieved, hoping she had finally grown up and would soon get married. But an unexpected obstacle emerged, threatening to disrupt her newfound stability. Warren's friend Roy, who claimed to be highly sensitive, sensed a dark and malevolent presence in Chana, despite her kind and friendly nature. His concerns were dismissed due to the contrast between his perceptions and her outward appearance. One day, Roy approached Chana, asking about Norman, a name that kept appearing in his mind, implying she might be unfaithful to Warren. Chana's response was shocking. She spat in his face and demanded he stop questioning her. Chana's friend, Norman, was later revealed to be the name of her imaginary childhood friend, Zazzle. This discovery changed the dynamics among their group of friends. At a party, Chana became interested in 24-year-old Martin. Martin came from a respected and wealthy family, unlike Chana. He had a good relationship with both his parents and was smart, well-mannered, and performed well in school. However, Martin had been struggling with a mental illness since he was 6 years old. He started having hallucinations, claiming that an entity appeared to him, making him believe he had incredible strength. As Martin grew older, his mental condition worsened, leading to problems at school and home. At 14, he was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Although conventional treatment didn't work, his family and doctors eventually found the right medication to control his condition, except for occasional outbursts of aggression. Chana and Martin, two unstable young individuals, started a romantic relationship. Despite their outward appearance of happiness, their parents were oblivious to the issues the couple had faced in the past. As their relationship progressed, it ultimately led to devastating consequences. At first, the couple was social and outgoing, attending parties and interacting with others. Friends recalled noticing cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. However, as time passed, Chana and Martin began to withdraw from their social circle and developed an interest in dark practices, including Satanism, voodoo, and occult rituals. This fascination eventually extended to infamous serial killers. In 2011, Martins posted a photo with his girlfriend Chana on social media, captioned "Killers" with an ambiguous emoji. At the time, no one took the post seriously. However, unbeknownst to others, the couple had dark fantasies that eventually turned into a sinister plan. They wanted to torture and kill homeless people, and even practiced on animals. But their plan was put on hold, as they couldn't find a suitable victim. Chana created a profile on a dating site and caught the attention of Michael Van Eck. The couple targeted him for their twisted plan, and Chana suggested they meet in person. Michael agreed, despite the unusual meeting location. Chana and Martins carefully prepared for the date, planning every detail, including what to wear and how to end Michael's life. Chana approached the meeting fully prepared, and the trap was set. Michael fell for the bait, and Martins attacked him from behind with a knife. Despite being stabbed around 30 times, Michael resisted, which caught the attackers off guard. Chana intervened, and together they overwhelmed Michael, who begged them to end his suffering. After the attack, Martin slit his own throat, and the couple began to dismember Michael's body. They severed his legs and decapitated him, placing the body parts in bags. They buried the body in a shallow grave, but couldn't make it deep enough due to lacking shovels. They then left the scene with the body parts using Michael's car, which they later abandoned in a troubled neighborhood. The next day, a cemetery worker discovered the grave and alerted the authorities. Meanwhile, Michael's parents were frantically searching for him, and his workplace reported him missing. The police found Michael's car, which led them to the cemetery, where they uncovered the gruesome crime scene. The local police were already investigating a mysterious body found on the cemetery grounds, with all signs pointing to foul play. They brought Michael Van Eck's family into the picture, as he had gone missing a day earlier. At the cemetery, Michael's mother identified her son's body by recognizing his personal belongings and distinctive childhood burn scars. The autopsy revealed that Michael had suffered multiple knife wounds and signs of struggle. The body had been dismembered after death, with a level of professional precision, suggesting the perpetrators had experience with such acts. The evidence pointed to multiple attackers being involved, given the number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to overpower the victim. DNA testing confirmed the body was 23-year-old Michael Van Eck's. During the investigation, police seized Michael's phone and computer, tracing his last communication to Chav Van Haan, who had invited him to the cemetery on the fateful night. When questioned, Chav and her boyfriend Martin confessed to their involvement in the murder. Chav's father was shocked by her calm and defiant confession, in which she claimed to have dreamed of committing such a crime since she started hunting with him. The lack of remorse from the couple shocked everyone, and they seemed to relish the public attention. They had planned to take their own lives if caught, but later changed their minds, wanting to live the life of monsters. The police search of the couple's apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were covered in distorted portraits of Chav, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears in various guises. The police found disturbing evidence in the rooms, including ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and unknown objects. They also discovered the belongings of the murdered him, including his glasses and wallet. Martins later admitted that they took the victim's money to fund their next crime. The most shocking discovery, however, was made in the refrigerator. The police found the victim's head with his mouth sewn shut, which suggested that the couple planned to use it as a ritual bowl. Additionally, the victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. The police also found the victim's hand and leg buried near the murderer's home, along with the bodies of several animals. The girl's diary revealed her dark thoughts and plans. The evidence suggested that the couple derived pleasure from taking lives and mutilating bodies. Both Martins and Chana underwent mental evaluations, and the commission confirmed that they were aware of their actions and desired the consequences. In November 2011, Chana stood trial as a serial offender, despite it being a single incident. She openly admitted that she did not feel remorse and desired to repeat her actions. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chana with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, making her a more dangerous individual. Throughout the trial, she remained emotionless. Chana was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without parole, with 20 years for murder and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martins defended himself in court, claiming that he did not remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, which he believed pushed him and Chana to commit the crime. During the trial, he apologized to the victim's parents, although his apology sounded insincere. He implied that the victim was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, when in reality, the couple had lured him into a premeditated trap. Michael's mother was overcome with grief and struck Martins during one of the sessions. In the end, Martins was also found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving half of his sentence. After 2014, Chana and her lover Martins maintained a relationship through letters while he was in prison. In these letters, Martins referred to Chana as a dark goddess and wrote poetic phrases such as, "When you part your lips, words of a dead butterfly spill out, and they fall upon my mystical heart and paint it with sweet poison." However, over time, Chana ended the relationship, feeling that they had become emotionally disconnected from each other. While in prison, Chana exhibited exemplary behavior, teaching her fellow inmates art and theology. Some collectors, fascinated by notorious criminals, paid large sums for a photograph of Chana with her autograph, as well as a print of her hand. Martins also attracted a following, with a fan club that was monitored by the police for a long time, to prevent his followers from emulating his violent actions. Despite his circumstances, Martins continued to receive therapy and completed his education through correspondence courses. Ultimately, the case highlights how two unstable individuals, driven by their desires and lacking boundaries, can destroy an innocent life. Furthermore, it reveals how some people, often hiding behind a seemingly normal facade, can harbor dark and sinister intentions. Unfortunately, new acquaintances can sometimes have a profoundly negative impact on our lives, marking a point of no return. The case of Adam Strong. Adam Strong was born in 1972 in Cornwall, Ontario, Canada. Very little is known about his family and upbringing. He never got married and didn't have any children. Strong worked at a local gas station and also as a security guard on a movie set. People who knew him described him as eccentric and arrogant, believing he was smarter than others. He enjoyed arguing and trying to prove his point until others agreed, but he wasn't typically aggressive. On September 11, 2017, a fisherman in Oshawa, Ontario, made a disturbing discovery in the city harbor. He found a badly disfigured and decomposed human torso floating in the water. The fisherman immediately reported his finding to the police, who retrieved the remains and sent them to forensics for analysis. Due to the body's severe decomposition, experts had a hard time identifying it. The torso was missing limbs and a head, and its internal organs were gone. The only clues about the victim were that she was a young woman between 18 and 25 years old. Her fingerprints, dental records, and distinguishing features couldn't be used for identification. A partial tattoo on her neck was visible, but its design was impossible to determine due to decomposition. As a result, a DNA analysis was the only remaining option, but no matches were found in the existing database. The police then began investigating cases of young women who had gone missing in recent months. In November 2017, nearly 2 months after the discovery, authorities identified the body as 18-year-old Rory Rush, a high school student who had vanished in mid-August. She was several weeks pregnant at the time of her disappearance. Divers searched the harbor and nearby Lake Ontario shoreline, but no other body parts were found. The time and cause of death remained unknown. Experts examined the body and found numerous severe injuries inflicted while Rory was still alive, suggesting she had been tortured over a long period before her death. This discovery led to a major breakthrough in the investigation. 4 months later, an unexpected twist emerged. In December, the Wood family moved into a house at 19 McMillan Drive, Oshawa, where they noticed an unpleasant smell. Their downstairs neighbor, 45-year-old Adam Strong, assured them it was just a minor plumbing issue that he would fix soon. The neighbor tried to be friendly and polite, but there was something unsettling about him. When David's wife tried to welcome him with homemade cookies, he refused to let her enter his apartment, instead stepping out into the hallway and quickly closing the door behind him. In that brief moment, she caught a glimpse of his living space, which was in disarray, and was overwhelmed by the foul smell inside. Adam took the cookies, thanked the neighbor, and quickly excused himself. Later, when they crossed paths in the yard, he apologized for not inviting her in, explaining that he was about to start renovations, and his apartment was not presentable at the time. Despite his polite demeanor, he seemed visibly nervous. As the Wood family settled into their new home, they tried to ignore the unbearable smell. However, on December 29th, they finally called a plumber to investigate a sewer blockage, which had intensified the stench. Although the issue seemed minor and easily solvable, the discovery the workers made in the pipes was shocking. Even to experienced forensic experts, human body parts had been found. Sean Fenn, a plumber, and his partner were called to the Wood family's apartment to fix a clogged refrigerator drain. However, when they arrived, they were met with an overwhelming stench, which they soon discovered was coming from the apartment below, belonging to Adam Strong. Upon entering Strong's apartment, the smell intensified, becoming almost unbearable. Sean, an experienced plumber, had never encountered anything so foul-smelling in his career. While working to clear the pipe, Strong's behavior became increasingly strange and nervous. He refused to leave the area, constantly asking questions about the process. The plumbers tried to ignore Strong's antics, but what they discovered next would be shocking. As they extracted the blockage, they found over 10 kilograms of entangled flesh, hair, and bone fragments, including disfigured human fingers. Strong remained surprisingly calm, asking how the remains ended up in the pipe. Fenn immediately called the police, suspecting they had stumbled upon human remains in the pipes. When the police arrived, they confirmed the discovery of human flesh. Instead of denying the allegations, Strong calmly admitted that Rory Rush's body parts were stuck in the pipe, with additional remains stored in his freezer. A search of the freezer revealed a severed head, limb fragments, and more, all packed in plastic bags. The apartment was in disarray, with dirty dishes, rotting food, trash, and empty pizza boxes littering the floor. The police also found numerous adult magazines with sadistic content, as well as intimate toys, gags, whips, handcuffs, and devices for binding and hanging, suggesting a disturbing atmosphere. Adam's social media profiles openly displayed his interest in BDSM practices, with explicit photos and videos. Although he didn't have a long-term partner, several former partners accused him of being abusive, leading to their breakups. He wrote reviews of adult films and magazines, indicating he spent most of his free time consuming such content. Behind his calm exterior, he led a secretive life. The police cordoned off Adam's residence, treating it as a crime scene. The initial investigation suggested that they had a lot of work ahead, with potential discoveries that could be just as shocking as the head found in the refrigerator. Notably, the evidence found led investigators to suspect that the discovered body parts belonged to Rory Hash, whose torso was found in a water body 4 months earlier. A distinctive tattoo on the neck and DNA analysis supported this theory. In Adam's house, investigators found disturbing evidence of a gruesome crime. Hidden among piles of trash were the blood-stained clothes and shoes of Rory Rush, later confirmed to be the missing schoolgirl. The bedroom, where her bed was found, was covered in her blood, with splatters on the walls, furniture, and ceiling. A dissection table was found in the kitchen, suggesting that the suspect had dismembered and gutted the girl there. The entire area was contaminated with blood, skin particles, hair, and bone fragments. The bathroom was equally appalling, with dirt, blood, and signs of brutal acts everywhere. It appeared that Adam had attempted to dispose of the body by flushing it down the toilet in parts, but when this failed, he tried to fix the blockage himself. A large collection of sharp weapons was also found in the house, likely used to dismember the girl's body. Rory Hash was born in 1999 to a single mother, Shannon Dion. Despite her father's absence, Rory grew up in a loving environment. Thanks to her mother and grandmother, her family had a unique background, with her maternal grandfather founding a motorcycle club and being a skilled boxer with ties to the criminal underworld. Rory had a peaceful and carefree childhood, excelled in dance, and was an award-winning student. At 13, she received an award as the best cadet of the year in her local army unit. However, her life took a dramatic turn at 15 when she got introduced to drugs by a friend and became dependent. She began associating with questionable individuals, neglected her studies, and eventually stopped attending school altogether. For about a year, Rory's family tried to get her help for her addiction, but she would relapse every time. At 17, she ran away from home and turned to prostitution to support her drug habit. Then, her mother got her into a specialized program for teenagers with addictions, which forced her into treatment. This time, the efforts paid off, and Rory was able to get back on track. She got a job, studied remotely, and eventually earned her high school diploma. She started planning for college and began a serious relationship with a boy named Anthony. In June 2017, Rory told her mother that she was pregnant and planned to keep the baby. However, Rory's mother didn't know that her daughter had started using drugs again. Rory met with Constable Christopher Crane at a shopping center in mid-August. He had been monitoring her for 18 months to keep her away from negative influences. During their meeting, Rory confessed that she had started using drugs again and lost her job a month prior, often exchanging sexual favors for money or drugs. Constable Crane was deeply disturbed by her revelation and promised to help. He stepped away to make an urgent call to arrange for her hospitalization. However, when he returned, Rory was gone, and the constable was unable to find her. The next day, Rory's mother and uncle took her to the hospital after finding her incoherent due to substance use. They left her in the emergency room queue and stepped out for about an hour. When they returned, they were shocked to discover that Rory had vanished, and sadly, she was never seen alive again. A review of hospital surveillance footage showed that Rory simply got up and left the hospital on her own. Her family reported her missing the next day, but despite an extensive search effort and widespread social media attention, no one was able to find her. It's likely that her addiction led her to seek out drugs at Strong's house, where she may have exchanged sexual favors for them. After Adam alerted the police to the location of the remaining body parts, an investigation was launched. Investigators expected him to cooperate, but instead, he became unresponsive and refused to answer questions at the police station. He remained calm and denied any wrongdoing. Because there was no direct evidence linking him to the girl's murder, Adam was only charged with desecrating a body. His lawyer's efforts to secure bail were unsuccessful, and he was held in jail awaiting trial. The investigators struggled to find an effective approach to questioning him, trying to elicit an emotional response that might provoke a confession. Strong was evasive when questioned about Rory's presence in his house and what he did to her, but openly discussed his fondness for bladed weapons and extensive knife collection. A thorough search of Adam's house uncovered a dirty hunting knife with dried skin fragments that appeared human in a hidden closet. Although the DNA from the knife didn't match Rory's, it belonged to another individual. It took several months to identify the owner of the DNA, but by July 2017, it was established that the traces on the weapon belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, Rory Rush, who had vanished about 10 years prior. Candace Fitzpatrick shared similarities with Rory. Both struggled with substance abuse and legal issues, grew up in troubled families, and had a history of running away from home for months at a time. To survive, she would live with acquaintances and exchange sex for food and drugs. Born in 1989, Candace was 18 when she disappeared. Her family didn't notice her absence initially, and only reported her missing almost 2 years later, by which time all leads had gone cold. Candace's life and social circle led many to believe she could have ended up anywhere. Her parents thought she had run away and held on to the hope that she would return. However, in 2018, the news from law enforcement crushed their hopes of ever seeing their daughter alive again. It's worth noting that both victims of the suspect were the same age and looked almost identical, like sisters. This led people to believe that the police had caught a serial predator. When questioned about the second woman, the suspect Adam unexpectedly agreed to cooperate in exchange for better living conditions. He wanted a private cell, a large TV, internet access, and specific meals. Law enforcement officials were outraged by his demands, but they relented to get the information. Adam began his story by talking about his difficult childhood, including how he was abused by his stepfather from the age of 5. He also described how he started torturing and killing animals from the age of 7, finding physical pleasure in these acts. When the conversation turned to Rory, Adam Strong described in detail how he had dismembered her, seemingly taking pleasure in it, but claiming he only did so because she had died from an overdose. However, the police did not believe him, and he was unable to convince them of his story. When questioned about Candace, who had disappeared 10 years prior, Strong was surprised the police knew about her. He tried to find out how they had discovered his secret, and when told about human flesh stuck to an old knife, he became somber and regretful for not taking better precautions to cover his tracks. Strong admitted to meeting Candace, but denied killing her. However, the evidence gathered did not support his claim. In an attempt to gain sympathy, he inadvertently incriminated himself. The police informed him that Rory was pregnant at the time of her death, which Strong vehemently denied. The detectives realized that Strong would argue endlessly to prove his point, so they decided to provoke him into revealing more than he intended. They insisted that the victim was pregnant, and Strong, trying to prove otherwise, described in detail how he had examined Rory's reproductive organs and felt a pulsation, leading the police to believe that she might have still been alive during the attack. Later, Strong tried to deny everything, but his statements had been recorded on camera and were presented in court. He refused to disclose what he had done with Candace's body, and her remains were never found. The detectives were unable to learn about any other possible victims. During one of the last interrogations, Strong callously stated that he would like his condolences to be passed on to Rory's parents. At the trial, his lawyers argued that Strong was mentally ill and unable to be held responsible for his actions. However, a psychiatric evaluation determined that despite certain disorders, Strong was aware of his actions and could be held legally accountable. The trial began in September 2020, 3 years after Rory's death and 12 years after Candace's disappearance. Strong was charged with 2 counts of murder and desecration of Rory's remains. Although he never admitted his guilt, the evidence and his confessions left no doubt about his involvement in the heinous crimes. 4 of Strong's former partners also testified, describing his cruelty and violent tendencies. According to the prosecution, Strong had lured both women to his home, promising them money for intimate services, and then killed them. Adam Strong brutally murdered his victim, subjecting her to a prolonged and agonizing ordeal. He likely killed her out of fear that she would report him to the authorities. On September 4th, his mobile phone signal was detected near the city harbor, where he had dumped the victim's torso, hoping the current would carry it away. In April 2021, Adam Strong was convicted of murdering Candace Fitzpatrick and Rory Hash, as well as desecrating Hash's remains. He received a life sentence without parole. However, Strong showed no remorse, stating in his final remarks that his prison cell was an improvement over his previous living conditions. 6 months into his sentence, Strong unexpectedly revealed the location of his first victim's remains. The police followed his directions, and after several months of searching, they discovered human bones. DNA testing confirmed that the skeleton belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, which was officially announced. Investigators believe that there may be additional victims in the Adam Strong case, possibly including at least one more woman. Notably, when Strong was initially arrested, his personal belongings were confiscated, including a chain with 3 rings. He later requested the items return, stating that the rings held sentimental value. Relatives of Rory and Candace later identified 2 of the rings as belonging to their dead daughters. However, the 3rd ring remains unidentified, sparking speculation about potential additional victims.